Welcome to the Big Fat Podcast, my man.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You know, I broke a lot of rules today. You came here. I always tell Cody, hey, don't ask him any questions. Don't talk about anything interesting. And we've gotten into all kinds of things that are interesting. And we pretty much had 2 podcasts already that we didn't even hit record on. But I'm glad that I've been able to kind of get to know you. And now that I know there's some things that I do want to hit on and talk about with you. So thanks for taking the time to come down here and hang out with me at Big Fat Studios.
Oh, I look forward to it. No, this is a great opportunity for me too. Get myself out there. I mean, some people know me in the town. A lot of people don't. But this is a great opportunity to kind of express who I am and all the things I do than what maybe some people just know me for.
Yeah, and most people know you for your photography.
Yeah, mostly. I mean, because I do have the high school account. So I have been doing, in 2018, I took over and we created my banner program, which I create custom composited photography banners that make kind of cool for the kids that they've been doing up in Billings for years.
Those look great. I think those look super professional. I've been impressed with those. I didn't know that was you doing that.
No, that was me. Yeah, that's I had this idea because when I came back home back in 2008, no one was doing it. We were still shooting photos around here from like 1980. You had the classic just memory made with a little cutout picture and a little 5x7. And I'm like, well, that's kind of old school. That's the old technique, and everything's doing digital now. They do digital memory mates where it's an 8x10 and you custom and make them look really cool. We've been doing that in the cities for, probably since early 2000s, I would think. There's a guy who's been doing it forever. And I'm like, well, I can do that. Let's bring it to this little town, see if I can do something.
Well, they look good, and that kind of got you like in the door then with the schools.
Yep.
But you mentioned something though, and I didn't realize this until actually April was telling me a little bit about you, and she always is like, oh yeah, I grew up with him. I'm like, really? And I'm always surprised. I don't know. Like, I didn't grow up here, and but you grew up here in Columbus. You were, because I want to go back and figure and hear about a little bit of that part right there, because you're kind of an old timer. You're like, oh, a lot of people don't know me around here, but you're an old timer from around here now, right?
Yeah. No, I was born in 1980.
Tell me about that though, because that was an interesting thing you brought up with earlier. If you will tell me about that, like you weren't just like born at the hospital. How did that happen?
So I didn't learn this till recently. So
really, you didn't learn this story till recently? Like
this year, I didn't know exactly. I mean, I knew I was born in the town. I just thought I was born at the Stillwater Hospital, which isn't there anymore. It's gone, right? It's not here. So I was born here at Stillwater Hospital in 1980. December 31st.
Yeah.
My
At least that's what you thought?
Well, that's what I thought, but I didn't know anything about my delivery or anything else, and I really don't know to extent of everything completely, but so my mom went into labor. I was on my due date. I mean, I was on time. I was an on-time baby, so she was helpful for that, or thankful for that. But it was my dad, who was a dentist at the time, and another dentist in town. I think it was Doc Swanson was the other dentist where the library is now. That's where his office was. Okay. So, because
April, she remembered that your dad was the dentist. She told me about that.
Yeah. So, he had a practice for 35 or 36 years, I think. Okay. And it's where the title company is by down on Valley there. But but yeah, I think maybe it was Doc Swanson had that office. I can't remember how that worked. My dad would probably be yelling at me right now, correcting me, because he likes to do that. But anyways, so she went into labor and they went to the hospital. Well, back then there was no 911, 1980, and everything else. And the doctors didn't live in town. So my mom's doctor wasn't in town. It was just my dad and Doc Swanson and a nurse, I think, and they delivered me. So I didn't have the doctor was in town. He was out in the foothills. So he didn't get in town in time, I guess. So my dad and...
So it was at the hospital.
It was at the hospital, but it wasn't...
Wasn't with the doctor. It was with the dentist and...
Another dentist.
Two dentists?
Two doctors. I mean, they're doctors.
Yeah, they're doctors. Excuse me. Yeah, but I don't mean to take anything away from them, but that's not what they do.
No, I mean, they don't... Delivering babies isn't their...
Yeah.
And their kind of thing. So I didn't know that. My mom said, no, and she's like, your dad was there and...
I mean, it's amazing to me, though, that you just found that out. Like, if I was your dad, I'd have been like, yeah, I'm the man. Like
he might have, but I didn't know that. But like I
every year on your birthday would be all about me. I would be like, yeah, I'm the man. I brought you into this world.
My dad's claim to me being born on the 31st was that he got a tax credit. Because he made the deadline, right?
Yeah.
So I got the tax credit. But yeah, I did know that. My mom was just telling me that with my wife this year. I think it was right on Christmas time. We were sitting there just talking, and she's like, talking about babies, and like, the doctor wasn't in town, so I was in labor, and
that's pretty intense.
Yeah, and that's not the only time that my dad actually and old Doc Swanson did kind of a procedure in the hospital sometime in the middle of like 80. I want to say I was probably 5 or 6, 85, 86. My grandfather was he did drywall his whole life and that kind of stuff, did construction work, and he went to like a 4B's restaurant after church one day. He was eating ice cream, and he didn't see the toothpick in it, and he swallowed a toothpick.
Oh my gosh.
It was about this long. Okay.
Oh my.
So he didn't know it. It just went down because he just took a bite of ice cream and it just went down. Well, he was up at the house here and he was doing some work. We used to live off 4th up here, and he did work, and all of a sudden he just grabbed his side.
How do you swallow something that long? Anyway, go ahead.
That's a good question. And he just hit his side and went down, and my dad was there, and they looked over at my grandfather, and they're like, oh my God, what happened? And went over and grabbed him and had to help pick him up, and they took him to the hospital because it shot down in his stomach. It kind of got lodged down there. And yeah, I thought in my head, I remember that as a kid, like seeing my grandpa in the hospital afterwards and seeing like the picture of the toothpick, and I can vaguely remember. I mean, I wasn't.
Does somebody still have that picture?
Remember? I don't know, but like remember.
I'd have that framed.
Like, being young and remember my grandpa in the hospital. I thought for some reason in my head, of course you don't remember things probably as well you do back that far, but I thought that was in Billings. No, it was here at the Stillwater Hospital, and my dad and the other doc did the surgery.
Like, what do you mean did this? Like, went in there? Like, he's a dentist. They're both dentists?
Yeah, went in and did the surgery. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
My mom.
I want to learn more about this.
If my mom watches, and my dad will probably correct me on some of the stuff, but I almost swear she told me that too. She goes, "No, it was your dad and the doc that went in and did that surgery, emergency surgery."
When you say the doc, are you saying
Swanson?
Doc Swanson?
I believe it was Doc Swanson. I might be wrong with the name. I'm sure I'll get corrected on this and get yelled at later, but I think it was Doc Swanson. But I mean, back then though, you got to remember that a lot. Like my dad, they go through full. Dentist school, they are doctors.
Right.
So they had an anatomy, but I mean, it's not like they're doing open heart surgery or anything anyway. Yeah. But I mean, I guess in an emergency situation, that's what they did. And yeah, they removed that toothpick out of there and he's fine.
Wow, that's amazing. I get squeamish about that stuff. Like that is just like, I don't know why, but things like that make me like, oy. Oh, yeah. Can't even imagine.
I'm sure my dad's got stories because I mean, as a kid, I can remember, guys coming from the mine and having rock slides and stuff, and teeth and stuff getting knocked out and stuff, and jaws broken and stuff. I know he's been called in for some of those. I remember those back in the day. I don't remember him doing them, but I remember him leaving to go do stuff because there was an accident. Yeah. Back in the 80s and stuff. But
I have a couple of scars from the mine. I didn't work up there too terribly long as some of those guys, but I'm kind of glad I have them now, and now I can be like, yeah, I was an underground miner, a hard rock miner, blah blah blah. I got one in my eyebrow where I got my eyebrow split. I looked up a little bit too late. I was turning off my jack leg, and I had my hard hat on. Here's a little story. I did not have my safety glasses on. Uh-oh. And I looked up, and because they would get covered in water and oil is coming down all the time. Have you ever worked at the mine?
No.
Okay.
I haven't been. I mean, I as a kid I did the tours and stuff. But I never worked at the mine.
Well, the thing was I was a miner. I can't remember if I was a miner. I think it was a miner 3 still. And so if you get injured as a miner 3 or as anything, you will get locked in at your current pay grade. Well, miner 3 is you'll get locked in at your pay grade for like a year. Maybe the policy's changed now. So as a miner 3, you're just working hard and you're everybody's grunt. And you don't want to be locked in. Like all you can think about is I got to just prove myself to these guys so I can get to miner 2. And then now you're going to get like your hourly wage and you're going to get a certain number of hours toward the contract every day. It's a small number of hours, but you don't want to get locked in as a minor 3. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but I look up, this rock comes down probably about the, I don't know, not quite the size of a tennis ball. And it just misses the brim of my hard hat and hits me right here. Boom. And the thing is so sharp. I dropped. I don't know how far it dropped from the ceiling. Mm-hmm. I say the ceiling. We call it the back in there. Anyway, I don't even know why I'm telling you this big, long story, other than I'm proud that I have some scars now from the mine, because it seems like a whole lifetime away now that I've been doing this other thing. But it's so funny because that thing hit me. I went down on the ground and I was like, oh my gosh, kind of lit up some stars. I got up and I'm trying to clean it up. And I've got these sleeves. We all wear these Kevlar sleeves to keep you from getting cut up, and you have to wear them. I think I had an extra set or something in my lunchbox, and they are not clean. I'm grabbing these things. I'm trying to mop my face, and a partner of mine, one of the guys, comes down there to check on me. And I turn to him and I'm like, hey, I got hit earlier. Is it can you see anything? He's like, his face was just I was apparently a mess. I had blood all over my face.
Oh, head wounds.
I couldn't see it down there. It just kept bleeding. He's like, oh my gosh. And he's like, it was so funny because he's like, where are you wearing all your stuff? I'm like, dude, I wasn't wearing my glasses. I couldn't see. All the water and the oil was coming down, covering my glasses, and I couldn't see, so I took them off. And he's like, oh, dude, you're going to be so busted. Where's your glasses? So he's trying to get me mopped up. He's like, I'm going to the lunchroom. I'm going to get you some paper towels or something. Or we got to get some water bottles. You got to get this cleaned up before somebody sees this. And he comes back, and then he grabs my glasses, and he's like, dude, you had to have been wearing your glasses. And he takes the glasses, and he's going over there on the rock, and he's like, about where did you get hit? And he's trying to find where, and he's trying to scratch the glasses on the wall. So it looks like I was wearing my glasses. Oh my gosh, all of what we did because I was nervous about getting locked in as a minor 3. Luckily, it happened on a Friday. I went up after shift. My head was kind of swollen right here. It was split open pretty good. And I put my hood up as we were up on waiting to get released to go to the showers. And so I could get out of there, and that way I could come back on our first day back and be like, oh yeah, that happened on days off, and not get in trouble. Yeah. Anyway, so that was minor, so minor, but now I have this thing that makes me look like I'm angry all the time or very stern or something. I don't know. I had people in photos will be like, dude, why are you so serious? I'm like, it's a scar that gives me a wrinkle, and everybody thinks that I'm overly serious or something. I can't imagine the stuff these guys were seeing, though, coming down from the mine and the injuries they see, because those guys up there have real injuries. I did a podcast with my buddy Shelby Burrows. Mm-hmm. I saw a rock come down about, if you were to put 2 footballs end to end together, I saw a rock come down on the back of his head and neck. It would have broke my neck. I'd have been dead. Come down on him and hit him back here. And I think it spooked him, scared him more than hurt him. Mm-hmm. It would have broke my neck. Yeah. He swore and was cussing, and I was like, dude, are you okay? And he stormed off and then came back and kept working. That would have killed me. Oh. I saw it come out of the back, come loose, and come down on top of him.
Yeah, and I'm sure when my dad was going in on, getting called into the hospital and stuff, I know there was things like that. Just, a rock came loose, and the guy turned around and, catch it in the teeth or whatever.
Oh,
but I know,
gosh.
I'm sure he's got more stories on that. But I know for a few times that he told me that, yeah, he's like, I got called in because, I had to stabilize him enough so they could get him to Billings and stuff. And had x-rays, and they were asking him whatever to do to help splinted. I don't know if he splinted a jaw, but I mean, just
something to hold something,
just to maybe help with bleeding or whatever the situation would be. But I'm like I said, I didn't know and that kind of stuff, and I'll text my mom to make sure this story is completely true. But I swear to God, she told me all it. She's like, no, the doctor was in the foothills and I was in labor, and he was in on it. So maybe the doctor, I don't know who the real doctor was back then, but I know that my dad did do some of that kind of stuff, because they were
just filled in.
Yeah, we had to. There wasn't what we have now. Right. We have way better care around here than we did back then, for sure.
Wow. So growing up though in that kind of a household, and your dad's the local dentist, did you not ever have that desire to go down that path?
Not really. my mom's worked at the Silversmith since it started. Well, within a couple years of being started there, she's been there 43 years now.
Wow, incredible.
So she's been there startup. So she's kind of her story in her own, where she didn't go to school. She graduated from high school, but she didn't go to college or anything to be anything. She just kind of started with a company ground up, and it worked all the way up. She went through, secretary with Kent Williams, and then I think she did sales, and then she went up, and now she's the HR director.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of stuff. So she's been doing that for a long, long time. And my dad, he got done with dental school, and they moved back here because he went to school in Minnesota. And he graduated from University of Minnesota with his dental degree.
Okay.
And he did his undergrad at Carleton, which is in Northfield up in Minnesota too. It's just a school that he got a wrestling scholarship from because he graduated from West, and my mom was, she's out of senior. She went to senior in Billings. So they're always Montana people here. But when they came back and everything else, my mom was, just working those jobs, and my dad was starting his practice and that kind of stuff. But, I was okay with blood. I've never been bad about it, but being a dentist, I just never thought about putting my hand in people's mouths for...
It was really not your thing, huh?
It never was. I've always been a creative person, and I think that's what kind of changed it. Not that my dad's pretty creative. He's done some sculpting and that kind of stuff. He's made some animal sculpts.
I think in dentistry, you got to be a little bit creative, right?
Yeah, and definitely now. Now with all the tech, he kind of stopped his practice, but he was using all the Cerax stuff where you're making your crowns, where they have the mills and that kind of stuff. So he is creative. So I think I get some of that from him.
But it just wasn't going into that.
I just didn't think I wanted to be a dentist. As most kids do. Around here we were all sports, growing up with kids, outdoors kids. You talked with Cole Walter. That's what we did. We just were.
Right.
We lived outdoors to do anything, and I just never thought about being a dentist. I just never was something that was on my mind, and I don't think it's because of what he did. It just wasn't my appeal, I guess.
So then how early did you figure out, because I know you went to school and I want to hear about that. At what point did you start to figure out, like, hey, I like video, I like photography? How did that work then? How did you find out that that's the road you want to go down?
So school was great because when we had FFA back then, we actually started the first broadcast award for the entire organization. We kind of helped push that through. So as a freshman, we came in and they were already starting to kind of at the high school, they did, in the old gymnasium, they wanted to do a live broadcast of the games, which back in 94 wasn't really it wasn't what it is today. Nowhere near. There was no internet back then.
Oh, yeah.
So the teacher
actually, 94, it was like just getting started, but nobody could even conceive that they were going to be streaming on it.
Well, no, I guess, I remember the old AOL days. I was probably right about a freshman. So, but it wasn't a thing. It was never thought about, with what we have now for broadcasting.
Oh, yeah, no, of course.
Those things were just glimpses in the future,
Yeah.
But the teacher at the time, it was Mr. Larson. He went to the state, and we got a broadcast channel from the state. So it was Channel 6. And it didn't broadcast over the entire state, though. So it was just locally. So we had it grounded to the nursing home and the hospital so they could watch live broadcast games. And so we set it up where we had 2 on-air personalities and a camera operator, and we would go to the games and do live on-air work. We would do stats. We would announce players, play-by-play. And it also broadcasts on I think it was a radio frequency, I believe. I can't remember which one it was. But so the games were broadcast live. It's 90 or the Mountain here, 93 the Mountain. They do live broadcasts of the game still on the radio station,
right,
for playoffs and that kind of stuff, which is cool. So we were doing that, but we were doing that as kids.
Yeah. So you're like catching the bug early.
Oh yeah. So it was. I think everything hit at the right time for me there, because right after that, internet became thing. But what we use now for photography work, Photoshop, was a thing. It became the first program, which is what I used to do all my photo editing and everything else. It was version 3.1 when they brought it my senior year in 98, 99, into the high school. And we had a teacher, and we were, he just came in and said, hey, we're going to do this program and everything else. And at the time, we were just goofing around as kids. All I had was paint brushes and everything else. We're painting really bad things, and we weren't photo editing and everything. But I was just like, oh, this is kind of neat. And I started making some kind of really low end graphics that, today people would laugh at, but
I know, right?
Just kind of having some fun,
Yeah.
And it's that kind of bug kind of took over, and I always loved art. Art was always one of my favorite classes. I love science too, but art was just the thing. It just kind of captured me, kind of let me be free.
Yeah.
Kind of design, because I was like, in my head, I'm like, I want to do a job where I may be doing similar things every day, but not the same thing every day. I don't want to just be, if I'm a mechanic, I don't want to just be turning a wrench on the same vehicle or a different vehicle every day. It just doesn't have enough to keep me excited.
I hear you.
So, and it was fun because we took a vacation down to Florida. My brother was pretty young. We went down to Disney, and we went through Orlando studio, and that's where I got my first look at special effects. So we did Universal's tour with my dad, and we went into this. It was a monster, and it was like Terminator. I remember it was a Terminator set, and so they had a monster come in the room and everything else, and had a big green screen. And my dad got called out of the audience. There was like 50 of us, and then they put him in the chair, and they're like, okay, so sit here in the chair, and when the monster comes, be afraid, and then we're going to morph your face. So I'm watching my dad up there, and he's acting and everything else, but I'm looking over the corner at the guy in the corner running a computer, and he does the green screen, and all of a sudden he's putting in the whole ship background, like the inside of the spaceship. And he's showing, and all of a sudden these lights and stuff going off. And then you look at my dad's face, and he's done something where the side of my dad's face starts like sliding down the right side of his face, and he's sitting there live, and I'm going, oh, this is cool. What is this? I want to do that. That is, wow, this is cool. Because it was,
what's funny?
I'm from Montana. I've never seen, I mean, Star Wars,
But even back then, that was pretty advanced, like, video technology back then. Nowadays, it's like, I'm sure we have more power on our phones than what that guy had to be able to do that back then. Now people are sitting there green screening while they're live and streaming and broadcasting all over the world and right there. But for that time period.
99?
That was epic.
It was huge. So it got done. Everyone walked out of the room to go on to the next exhibit or explore, and I stayed with my dad, and we talked with, I don't remember, it was a director or whoever who's in the studio, and I was just asking, like, I was just caught for whatever reason, like, that is cool. I'm like, is this what they use? Because I've been seeing some of the behind the scenes from like the Star Wars that had come out in the 90s, and you kind of saw that George Lucas had kind of graduated from the puppeteering stuff to that they've graduated more
going into some computer generated stuff.
I'm like, is there a job in this? Is this actually a career? And the guy there was like, yeah. He goes, he was like a senior animator, and he'd worked on, I don't know, a couple of different films and stuff. And he goes, yeah, we shoot all this stuff, and then we use computer generated software to make 3D. 3D was kind of a slow thing at that time. It wasn't what it is now. And they were able to start putting all the special effects in, removing people. And the whole thought of just taking someone out of an environment, or taking the environment away from somebody, and then you can put anything you want in there, and make it jazzed up and cool. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like something fun, something I would like to do. But then I was like, where am I going to go to school for this? So we get back home. Nobody. I mean, the resource, or the your counselor, she's like, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know where you could go like that. I'm like, well, it's got to be California, right? It's got to be a California school, because that's where everything's at. It's Hollywood,
Right.
So I'm like, okay. So I started looking, and I found a couple different places, and then
this is kind of big thinking for a small town Montana kid, though. For you to go down there, get that exposure to that, and catch that kind of a bug, like, that's kind of big thinking. Like, that's not everyday stuff. That's thinking outside of the box.
And I don't know. I wouldn't say I was really adventurous, but I was just like, in my head, I'm like, I want to do something that is different.
Yeah.
Not everyone does, and something that someday that I could go into Hollywood, make it to a film, and go up and see my name at the end of the credits and go, yeah, I worked on that. I remember doing that scene. I was just like, yes, that's what I want to do. And so through some research and everything else, I ended up finding a school in Colorado, in Denver. So I went to the Art Institute of Colorado. It was Art International. It's now been dissolved a couple years ago. It was bought out, and it doesn't really exist. I think there's one school left in Pennsylvania, the main school, but they had a computer animation degree, a bachelor's degree. And I was like, well, I like Colorado, and I had some friends of the family. My dad's old college roommates lived there, and I like Denver. Yeah. I'm like, oh, sweet. Okay, that's not that far. I can still come home for Christmas. It's not a big plane flight. I can drive. It's got mountains. So it won't completely. I was more worried as not being a city kid. Going, man, I just want to have some nature. Around me. I can't just be locked into a city. I think I'd go nuts, and I eventually proved that to myself. I can't be in a big city for too long. But Denver wasn't as big as it is now. I mean, it's huge now. I mean, when I lived there, Fort Collins in Denver, there was still some gap in there, and now it's just it's all one thing. Suburb. It's all the way up to Cheyenne now. Yeah. I mean, it's packed. So it wasn't but it was a great time. I mean, I had a great time in Denver. I spent 4 years, got my media arts and animation degree, graduated in 2003, and this whole time I'm having a great time. I mean, special effects. We had some great professors that worked. I'm trying to think of his name. He worked on Charlie Brown for 30 years.
Oh, really?
So he was so we did traditional animation. So when I said I wanted, computer side was my thing. I was an okay artist, but a lot of the kids coming in were coming from classically trained, where they had life drawing classes, like with nude models and seniors in high school, where I've never drawn a person in my life, And so I was like, I didn't know if that was my route. So I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. I just want to do the computer side. I want the visuals, and I want to do 3D. Well, I had to learn everything. But like I said, I got to work with great guys because I had to do the old 2-line, old school Walt Disney animation. We had to do those. I mean, I had to make a 30-second cartoon, and you have to draw 12 frames of art to make 1 second.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's a lot of work. And then you got to lay a page down, you got to fold it back and forth, and you got to make it so you can see the next movement. Right. And you got to plan it all out. And then you got to, I mean, it was a bear. I mean, I really struggled for a while, and I kind of found my style of drawing. I'm more of a conceptual artist. Like a finishing artist is really, they go in for all the details and that kind of work. Mine is just like, I can get it into place and get it there. And then that would go in a real studio. I would draw the beginnings of all the movements, and all the fine details would go to the next guy. So I wouldn't do all of them. But when you're doing it yourself, you got to do it all. You got to do it all. You got to find timing. You got to, I mean, it's a real thing. And we did like old stop motion animation. So we did clay sculptures and paper, where you literally take a cutout character, take it, and then you take his arms and you draw on the side, and then you take a piece of thread and you thread in his arm so you can make the arm go up and down. So you had some movement. So it was like, paper choppy. Yeah. But I mean, we did that original style animation. They taught us from the ground up, from doing line work all the way into 3D.
Wow. The only thing I was doing remotely close to that was, we didn't have smartphones like the kids now do, but I would sit in church and take the hymn book and do a little line figure guy, and then go to the next page. Yeah, and then do the flip thing and sit there and flip those things. And I don't know, like have him doing whatever. But that was how I'd pass that time, sitting there doing all that.
So we used to do that because we did flip books all the time. Yeah. And so we had to take, general classes and that kind of stuff. And the one I had to take it twice because I just hated it was art history. It's the most boring thing on earth, and I can't believe people still get degrees in it. But it's just, you have to like identify like Baroque periods and Renaissance periods by just looking at a picture. I could have cared less. So we had friends in our class, and we would make picture books while in class, and we'd make picture books of like Tweety Bird flipping each other off, and then we'd go over there and flip them at each other. Because we were animators. It was fun because the school was a old building right next to the Capitol building. So I mean, it was right downtown. Oh, you're right downtown. So 12th and Lincoln, and the Capitol building's on like 15th. So like 3 blocks away, and there's the Denver Capitol building, the Capitol. So it was cool being in that area. 16th Street Mall. Well, it was Pepsi Center at the time. Now it's Ball Arena. I mean, I'm a huge Avalanche fan. I got hooked into hockey back then. But
what's funny is that so my brother, he was the mascot for the Denver Nuggets for 30 years through all that period.
Oh, cool.
And so there was a couple summers I went and actually stayed with him, and and I was a stagehand, and I worked at the McNichols Arena was what it was back then, and I would do concerts up at Red Rocks, and sometimes we would go down on 16th Street Mall, and I'd have a video camera, and he would be just doing stuff on 16th Street Mall. Now it would have been like TikTok content that would get millions of views, like the stuff he was doing, and as a mascot. And we actually did some other stuff just even out of work that we were shooting down there on 16th Street Mall. So anyway, I'm familiar with all that stuff, but this is all like all the stuff we were doing now, it just cracks me up, or doing then cracks me up, because that would have been like, we would have been posting content, and we were doing that down in those areas. So
we used 16th Street Mall to get beer money.
How would you do that?
Oh, so when we had the arts, it wasn't just animation. They had graphic designers, they had photographers, which there was a photography degree in there, and they had a culinary school. So it's an art school. So
yeah. So do you guys like go down there and set up and do art for people?
No. So we had guys in there.
Wasn't that
one
wholesome?
guy was Scottish and could play the bagpipes. We had a guy from Australia that could play the didgeridoo. And so we would go down and pretty much put on a little concert down like midway down there and just panhandle.
Yeah.
Oh my God, did that work well?
Oh, I bet.
I remember the best time in 4 hours. One time we made $800.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Those guys are just playing bagpipes and then playing the didgeridoo. And we were just sitting there guarding the cases, and we had a couple gals that were they were graphic designers, but they were also into dance. And so they just did like really hippie minicky dance routines in there, and people would just stand there, and we'd had crowds. But a keg back then was like $70. And so, I mean, we would just go down, and when we had a 4-story apartment called the Gotham City Apartments. Animators were going nuts because of Batman. They're like, we live in the Gotham City Apartments.
Right.
So the 3rd floor was the party floor. I don't know why, it just got established that way. It was 5 floors. And so we were like, all right, it's party time. Everyone, 3rd floor.
Congregate on the 3rd floor.
Yep. So then we'd go, and that was a time when Subway, you could get a big sub sandwiches and beer, and that's what we did.
Were you guys getting any kind of a permit to be down on 16th Street Mall, or were you just showing up?
No, man, it was the cops. The cops are funny because they were the bike cops, and they were smart enough, and I'm using that air quote, smart enough to just ride down the center, but they always came from the same direction. And 16th Street Mall, you would know, it's long. You
had to watch out. There was like buses going up and down. Yeah. There wasn't driving on it, but you could get on these buses that were like a trolley.
The little trolley. But the cops would come from the same direction, and you could see for almost half a mile. And so one of the jobs of us to do while we were playing this music was be the lookout. And as you would see the cops coming, you would take the guitar, or the case that we had. We had a guitar case. I don't know why we had a guitar case, because we had a didgeridoo and bagpipes. Yeah. But that's where we had our money. And we'd close it together, and we'd run around the block, and it's city block, so it's not a short, like around here, like, 150 yards maybe, but we'd have to go all the way around. The cops would go by, they'd go out to the end of the Union Station and disappear, and we'd come back up and set back up and start playing again. And he would just cycle it, because they would never come back. And the Union Square where we were was like a quarter of the distance away, and we did just circles on them. But I don't think they really cared too much, because they knew we were college students. I mean, we weren't. I mean, there was your homeless population, and they worried more about them because of the drugs. They were shooting up needles and that kind of stuff still then. But I think as kids, they probably would have just given us a warning. We had no permits. We were college kids.
So I have to admit to you what we were up to down there. One time we went down there, and so my brother has the idea. He's like, hey, I wonder, I always see these guys panhandling at like downtown and all these other areas. Like, let's go, and I'm going to dress up now I feel bad, like, it's terrible, probably, right? Nowadays, people would be upset about this, but I'm going to admit. So I had a video camera, and he went and stood at some off-ramp. Like, he called the police and asked them, like, what are the rules on this? Like, I can't get arrested, but, like, what are the rules on this? And they just said, hey, no, it's not illegal as long as you're just not being aggressive and whatever. You can stand there and hold a sign. He's like, that's all I want to do, is I want to stand here and hold a sign. It was kind of our own little social experiment.
Right.
And we just wanted to see what happened. How did people react to that? And I had a video camera. And he went and stood at some off-ramp. And this dude comes walking up with a backpack on. And he's not out camping. He's, living in downtown Denver. So he comes walking up. He's like, hey, man, hey, brother. He's like, hey, man, you know what? You need to go down to 16th Street Mall. Man, it's way better down there, man. All right, man. All right, brother. And so my brother's just like, doesn't really know what to say to this guy. He's like, oh, he's playing this part as this, like, really beat up homeless guy. And so he comes back to me. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, what did that guy say to you? He's like, he said go to 16th Street Mall. I'm like, I don't know, man. I guess let's go down there. So we went down there. And he stands outside of some place and just stands there and holds this sign. And people are just walking up and just like walking by him and just handing him money. And I felt terrible. This super nice little old lady goes walking by him and comes back. And then like, you can see her digging in her purse. I'm videoing all of this from a distance. Mm-hmm. She comes back and like gives him some money, and he's holding this pizza box that has written on it like hungry and whatever, God bless, and it was like misspelled, like God bless was misspelled. And oh my gosh, he could only do it for like an hour. I want to say he made like, I don't know, 30 something bucks. I can't even remember what it was. We were just all blown away. We're like, dude, you made like 30 something bucks in an hour just standing there, people walking up handing you money. And we went home and edited it and put it together with the Jeffersons theme song of Moving On Up. And we like cut all the highlight clips together of all these people coming in and handing him money. And we made this video that we didn't do anything with. We just like made a funny home video. And by using 2 VHS players together to edit it, we didn't have anything fancy to edit. So I can't remember how he did it, but we used 2 VHS recorders to edit the footage and put music to it. It was just so crappy edited, but it was anyway. So you bring up panhandling on the 16th Street Mall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been there.
It's not crappy editing either, too, because so we had to do school projects. So part of my graduation requirement was I had to have a portfolio. So I'd have a big drawing portfolio. It had to be 40 pages, whatever your work style was, but it had to be a complete portfolio. Mm-hmm. And then you had to have a 3 to 5 minute demo reel. So that means you had to come up with a project and show your skills of where you want to try to get a job, right?
Yeah.
Well, we also had school projects where we had to go do, when we started learning video editing, which was real primitive back then, was the first Premiere, which is now a big thing with Adobe, but it was their first editing suite. We would actually get projects and we had to come up with an idea. So one of the ideas we did was we wanted to go and show the homelessness down on 16th Street Mall and find somebody that was interesting enough to go up to me like, can you tell us your story? Kind of make it like, not like a true life drama, but kind of like just,
right. No, it's just
kind of show it.
Yeah.
So
exposing reality.
I wish I could find a copy of this. I'd love to send this to you. It was old. We shot it on high 8. We were just getting into digital cameras at the school, but we shot on high 8 because we wanted to make it look, mysterious and real, documentary style. We found this guy, and he was there always. He was kind of, I can't remember to describe him. He was always had a full beard. I think we called him 16th Street Jesus because he kind of was just bearded and he always had a big long, it was a jacket, a big wool jacket. Uh-huh. And so we went and we got to know him. His name was Glenn, and he was originally from like upstate New York, and he had a lot of troubles. He had drug abuse and that kind of stuff. This guy, I'm not kidding you, we asked him, because he panhandled every day, we're like, well, what do you make down here doing this? Is this enough and everything else? Unbeknownst to us, this guy was making $40,000 to $50,000 a year panhandling.
I believe it.
Now, and this was his gig. This was his stick. So the books, like you get your inspirational books every year, 365 days of inspiration. So he would hold a sign, and the sign would be like, hungry, need help, but we'll bless you with good fortune, a quote of good fortune. He would take the days,
memorize that one for the day,
keep it under the sleeve of his arm, memorize it, and everybody he said the same line of whatever that day's meant. It was like, be happy and go with life or whatever, and people would tip him to say the same line. But he would just go every year into the paper bookstore, buy that year's 365 days of motivation, and just repeat it. And he actually had an apartment off-site, but he would be out there 10, 12 hours a day, and that's what he did.
Yeah, that's not a guy who doesn't have a job. That guy created a job. I mean, that's his job. And in his own little way, like, he created value for somebody. That's what you just said. They tipped him because he created value for them. And even though they got the same regurgitated quote, they got somebody who gave them some kind words or something. And there was an exchange there. Like, I got nothing. That's, to me, dude, he probably loved it. Like,
and we showed it. We had this little, so we had to present it.
I got nothing but respect for that. That was what I was going to say.
Yeah, for that, and we had this little theater. It was called the Bug Theater. It was this little old theater that we show our class projects. Everyone would have it every quarter because we did a quarter system. We didn't do semesters. And so we show that into it and everything else. And, his only thing was like, well, he's like, don't, show the authorities or anybody because, like, I don't want to get in trouble. We never did, but we showed it, and they had like little awards and stuff when we won, like a documentary award, which was just a little, I think we each got like a gift card for food or something, but those videos are good. How
interesting though is it that there's those kind of stories out there? Like, you didn't spend a lot of time probably going and looking for this guy or whatever. You just picked this guy, but how interesting is it that this guy has that story and what that turns out to be? Like they're all around us. Like, those people with those interesting stories and backgrounds and what they're doing, like, they're all around us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the great thing about life, though. Everyone's got a story, a good story to tell. I mean, we talked for 2 hours before we even started this, and I've learned a lot about you, and you learned a lot about me. Yeah. We haven't even got the good stuff, and I'm just one person in this town. Yeah. I know there's lots of great people in this town, great stories. Yeah. And like I said, the power of that editing was fun, but it also, I think the reason I chose it was because it was interesting, because I wanted to make movies and everything else, but it also showed me how you can also, which has become a problem nowadays, where you can take a story and you can manipulate it. Yeah. And so one of our projects is we had to do that. And it was like,
create your own propaganda.
Create our own propaganda story. And I was just the editor, but I didn't come up with the story. So we each were given a position into this. We ran it like a real studio. So we each had a position. So I was the assistant animator and editor. And this group, and we had actual film students, because there was film students in, so they took 2 programs and they combined them to make this project. But this was the project, so we had to make our own propaganda, or you had to just show how you can manipulate things to make them seem what they're not. And it's funny if I remember it back then. So the story that these guys did is they went around around the campus, and they would ask people a set of questions. Like, it was kind of like a morning routine thing. Like, what's the first thing you do in the morning? I think was the question, but it was like 10 questions, and they asked them for 15 people. Well, what they didn't know is that we cut in before that, and this is really bad, just because they wanted to see.
This was the assignment, though,
the assignment, bad. So they were running those questions, but they ran the back side, and this is where it gets bad. I might get in trouble for this, but porn. They were talking about porn, but they would use these people's answers to talk about porn.
So they didn't, and those people didn't realize that what they're talking about.
Probably not using that. It's not porn, but little people or whatever. LPs,
yeah, right. But back then, that was what it was.
That's what it was.
It's called.
But I mean, when you took the answers and then you would actually go to the guy asking the real question, because he didn't answer. We had a on guy camera asking it, like you side cut it. Yeah. But it was just showing how you could manipulate something so easy and so innocent and make it look so bad. And there was a lot of other ones that were just as bad as ours, but it showed us that, like, listen, you guys, you have a responsibility and the power. Yeah. Again, you get to, like we have problems with now, you get to set the narrative. Oh, yeah. You get to do it. I mean, you could manipulate things so much easier today back than it was then. But I mean...
Oh, it's crazy.
It was funny to watch it back, because the questions were like, how do you feel about whatever? Well, I like to brush my teeth. It was the answer, and you're like going, what? It didn't make any sense. But that was the project. And it was 5 minutes of just to show you how powerful it can be, and how useful it could be, but how you could really manipulate it to make it something that's not, which...
It sounds like, but people have been doing that for ages and ages and ages, making propaganda, but it's like they have really perfected it now to this modern day. I was going down a rabbit hole yesterday of deep fake videos, and it's crazy. I saw one of, it looks like, it's like it's like Seinfeld, a mix of Seinfeld and Pulp Fiction. So they take a scene from Pulp Fiction and they mix Jerry Seinfeld into it. It looks exactly like Jerry Seinfeld. And he's sitting in this room while Samuel Jackson and John Travolta are on the other side of the door and doing this big old bit of dialogue. And he's sitting there with a gun, and he's listening to them, and he's nervous, and it's amazing. I don't know how they do this, how they do that type of digital work on that, but it's Jerry Seinfeld. And then they put a laugh track, like you're listening to Seinfeld with a laugh track, but you're watching Pulp Fiction. And I thought about it, like the youth of today, younger impressionable minds who just come across this without ever knowing or seeing Seinfeld or seeing Pulp Fiction could so easily put these two together and think that this was a real cut of something. And it's like, it's going to get so hard. It's getting hard to discern what is actual real in that video and what is not. Like, that ability to put out propaganda has gotten so, I don't know, so effective. They've gotten so good at it, and now it's getting hard. It's getting hard to tell what's real, what's not.
Boy, we could really go down a rabbit hole on this, because with the involvements and the money spent on artificial intelligence. I mean, Elon Musk has been doing that voice AI program where you can make it sound like, I think they've got like 100 people on there, and you basically just hit a switch. Like, you could do it right now, and you could be talking. I
saw that.
And that's crazy. But that's a tip of the.
Yeah, that's just we're just getting started.
And so, like I said,
that's Photoshop, 1999.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said, I started. I am a Photoshop warrior, because I started in 3.1, and now I'm on whatever we are now, 23. It's been evolved so much. But again, those classes taught you a lot. It taught you the real good parts of storytelling.
Yeah.
And how you could do it. Like I said, at the time we were 20-year-old kids, we thought it was hilarious, because we got to cut it up in the end when you saw it. But again, it did show you that, like, listen, you guys can really. Well, you can drive propaganda any way you want. I mean, it's nothing new in history. I mean, it's been done forever, but you got a real sense of, you got to take caution in what you do, and actually, if you're gonna do something along that line, you better know what you're getting into, because you can really make some damage too.
You can, and what I have learned over the last few years in how I create even my own content now, I kind of have been starting to kind of figure out what the essence of what photography and videography is, and that is to make people feel things. And that's what the point of that little propaganda little thing is like, we're going to make people feel things. And you have to be careful with that. It sounds like that's what they were teaching you, is like, hey, you have to be careful about this isn't just entertainment. You're going to make people feel things. And that is the responsibility when you're, I don't know. I think some people know that's what they're doing, and some people I don't think know that's what they're doing with content, whether it's video or photographs or something. It's like some people don't have that dialed in, but that's really the essence of what it, and that's my opinion,
right? But
the essence of what I feel like what your craft is making people feel things. It's how to draw an emotion, and what emotion are we trying to draw through this, even if it's just a basketball banner. There's an emotion that you're drawing from that. That's why people are like, oh, that looks so cool, or that whatever. There's an emotion that you're creating for somebody through that type of medium. Anyway.
Yeah, no, like I said, I mean, as a photographer, where I am now, like I said, I want a reaction. I want a positive reaction. I mean, that's what I'm always trying to achieve. I mean, someone may not like my style. That's completely fine. I mean, that is art. Art in itself is subjective.
As long as it pulled some kind of emotion out of them, though, then your mission is complete. Right. I mean, right? I mean, that's how I look at it. It's kind of like, as long as your art is making somebody feel something, then you have art.
Right. And, and I always strive with my photography and stuff is just I always try new things and make it stand out, make it unique to each person. I always try to photograph them, because everyone's unique. No one looks the same. I mean, even, identical twins don't look the same.
Right.
Everyone's unique. And I want to show that when I take my photography, no matter what it is. But also, like I said, I want reactions. My high school banners are different, because I want a strong reaction. I want the kids to feel like, hey, we're in this little town, but we also have cool, art that is ours that competes with what they're showing up in the buildings. I mean, when you used to walk into Buffalo Wild Wings, you got to see all the, West High and Skyview and all their cool banners and stuff that were being done for them, but it was never down in this smaller community. So like I said, when I created that, which has now become a thing, I mean, I've got a couple other photographers that try to do what I do, and they've taken my program and they've utilized it, which is fine. I mean, I'm great that I created something that people are like, oh man, this is really working for them. We should try to do that. And like I said, that's why when I do my banners and stuff, that separates them from anyone else's. I really push myself to make mine stand out more. Like I want my players to look, cleaner, sharper. I want them to be, I have standards that I do put on myself to make it as best I can, because I want to be, I mean, yeah, you can make a banner next to mine, but I want mine to stand out.
Yeah.
And it does it. And if it doesn't stand out, then I didn't do good enough. And I'll put that on myself. I don't put that on anyone else but me. That's not my responsibility, and that's my goal that I set out for myself, is to make it good enough that I can make something really, really, first off, cool, and something that the kids can be proud of.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, since I've been doing that, I've always given back to the school system. And I just did my math before this podcast to kind of figure out where I've been in. And since 2018 to now, I had just over $18,000 I've given back to the school.
Oh, that's awesome. That's incredible.
Which is a lot. I mean, I wish I could give more, but I don't want to also take my local community and try to raise the price enough that, they can't.
Yeah.
They don't want to do it. Like I said, when I have 3 teams, I always give back to each squad. So it's not like just one squad gets it. So what I take, the money that I receive in sponsorships, I take and get the cost of printing, the cost of the banners, and then I take that much and then I divide it in half, because at first I was just giving it all back, but I have to make a living too.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I take that, so I take the rest of it and then I split it 3 ways back side. But I also use that stuff for, the money left over for me isn't just for me. I use it for marketing. I use it to push for the next thing, and that requires me keeping up on all my stuff. Of course, I have to keep on my programs, my camera gear, and that's where I put it too. So everything that I do take, I always put back in the banners in some way. For it may not come out front, but I mean, cameras and stuff now, they're $5,000 cameras.
To get started.
It's a tick. So for me to do that, that's going to take at least 3 a year, probably, or more, to raise that money just doing banners. So like I said, it's an investment, but like I said, it's been really successful. I'm really glad, and I will always continue to do that. I will always get back to school. I always try to make at least $500, if not more, depending on print rates and whatever it comes out to be for those banners. But the banners are bigger now. They're 4x6s. And
how did you get then from Denver and to back up to hometown Columbus?
Oh boy. We're gonna get in the weeds here. So right after school, I graduated. I came back home for a little break.
Because it always seems to me like people that grow up in some little small town are like, I can't wait to get out of this town.
I was like that for sure.
Until you got to kind of get out there, and
until I got a taste of it. I've come back home so many times. But so right after graduation, I got my degree in like October of 2003. So I came out, and it just happened. I kind of talked to this briefly, and we'll just blaze by this. But right when I got my degree was in demand, high demand in the States. But because of some political stuff done and everything else, all the companies there shipped everything overseas. So we went over to Australia, China, New Zealand. So there wasn't as many jobs on the West Coast. I kind of had it in my mind that I would try to find work, maybe not California. There was some production companies up in like Vancouver, Washington, and that kind of stuff. And I had family in Washington. So I thought, well, this might be a spot for me, because I also have family around, because I still need my family and somebody I know in the area, so I can Well, I could never just be in some place where I didn't have any kind of connection. I think it would be too tough for me. So I started looking, and of course there was nothing going on. So I was back home for like a month, and my counselor down there, she goes, hey, there's this job in Pinedale, Wyoming. A guy's looking for a video editor and an animator for this new theater stuff that he wants to try, this marketing stuff. I'm like, well, it's below Jackson Hole. That's a cool area, sure.
Yeah, it's beautiful down there.
I jumped on my mom's Miata and drove down for an interview. And it's 70 miles south of Jackson Hole. It's at 7,000 feet. It's really high. It's a really cool area. At the time, there was a lot of oil rig workers around there. So it was kind of seasonal, because they they had the migration thing, so they could only be there for certain amounts, and then they had to leave for animal migration, so they'd leave the fields untouched. So I think it was deer and antelope. So it was kind of a small community. It wasn't much bigger than Columbus, actually probably about the same size. So I got in there and I did my interview, and so what you see now in movie theaters, you see all the ads, the pre-ads before.
Yeah.
You remember they used to be just like a slide shutter.
Yeah.
Well, he was the first one doing, I got in ground floor, the first one's doing video. He wanted to do video in the movie theaters, before the movie started.
Yeah.
So he wanted to go find ads, but actually do video, computer animation, go get your popcorn, welcome to the lobby, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I did that. So I got on the ground floor at that, and he had 12 movie theaters, little movie theaters like Ketchum, Idaho, Sun Valley, one in Jackson, there's a couple in Utah, a couple in Kansas, but we were just doing ads. So we had a sales guy go out and he would go get what I was doing, get clients, and then I would go and build animated ads, whether it was just taking their business card sometimes and just animating the logo and just so it has some movement.
Right.
Or I was creating complete, as much as I hated doing it, hand-drawn animations of, Coca-Cola bottles dancing or whatever it was to make go to the lobby and get popcorn, because that's where movie theaters make their money.
Right.
And I was there for about a year, but at the last tail end of my time there, because I was 24.
Okay.
And there wasn't anybody my age around there. I was the youngest person really in town. There was nobody kind of around my age, so it was pretty lonely, and I'd go back and home quite often, and I was having a hard time staying there. I mean, I love the outdoors. I mean, there was 50 lakes around me. Wow. I mean, the fishing was amazing. I mean, I had some great times, but it just, as a single person, I didn't have much, of any relationships down there, and I had friends, but they're no one my age.
Yeah.
And right at the tail end of it, he got in with Eastman Kodak, and Eastman Kodak was a division of Kodak. So there was Kodak paper and there was Kodak film. So they were on the Kodak film side of it, and they developed the first technology where they could upload things from a server to broadcast these live previews before the movie started, what you see now.
So that's coming from a central place instead of coming in,
Yeah. So, and they just heard that we were doing it, and they're like, this little tiny company in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, was doing what they really wanted to do. So they reached out to us and said, hey, can we implement this in these theaters? Because they wanted to put they had a projector that was hooked to a server. And so the great thing about that for anybody that advertised is it kept track of how many times their ad played, exactly what time their ad plays.
So it brought some control to it.
So it gave control, but it also gave all those advertisers a real assurance that, how do I know my ad played? Because when we did it in our theaters, once in a while the projector would stop, the bulb would burn out, and it wouldn't work, so their ad wouldn't play for a night.
That's interesting, because it gave the advertiser the reassurance that their ad played, but it also, I would imagine, they plugged in the ticket sales of how many people saw that ad.
Yep. It gave them all that. It gave them all stats. Stats were key, So it did. It gave them how many people saw the movie that night, how long the ads run, exactly what time the ad played. So then they brought me in because the way the video process worked was a lot different than I'd been doing. I'd just been burning it on CDs because we could just put it in and we just put it on autoplay, so it would just loop. They hit the power on, the projector would come on, and it would autoplay.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have that technology, so it was like, okay, this is great. So for 3 weeks, they sent me to LA, and I worked in the it's a Chinese Man Theater.
Wow.
So that's where they put their first prototype system, was in that. So, and it's really cool because I've been in the inside the Chinese Man Theater. I've been up where the projectors are. I've seen the thing, because they still do the thing where they raise the ropes up, or the curtains up for each show. And the movie station across the hall is where they did all, and they were teaching me how to do this projection. And it's where, at the time, it was X-Men. I don't know if you remember. X-Men 2.
Right.
They had the blue car and Wolverine and everything.
Yeah.
That's where they did all the special effects.
Oh, wow.
So by law of working not exactly where I wanted to be, I was kind of had my foot in the door of where I could maybe get into the special effects company, because they had the big server rooms. They had all these animators in there. And I was digging it. I'm like, oh, all right.
I found
great.
my people.
Yeah. I don't want to go back home right now. I want to go and learn how to do this. Well, long and short, after about 3 weeks of being in LA, that kind of told me that I wasn't going to make it.
You're like, I'm ready for Montana.
No, I mean, because Chinese Man Theater is right down in, in the central of everything. And, and I didn't end up paying it, but I knew how much I would have had to pay. Like, I was in a studio with 2 other animators. It was 1,100 square feet. And I think at the time it was $2,400 a month.
Oh my gosh. And I can't imagine what it is now. That's high for even, like, that's high now, but I imagine it's even way more down there.
04, 05.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then we commuted together, and we were 15 miles away from the studio. It took us an hour and a half to get to work. It took us 2.5 hours to get home every night. And I lived 15 miles. I could have walked faster. I couldn't. But, I mean, you know what? You feel that way. Like, I could get there faster walking, but the traffic was just so horrible. I couldn't do it. I'm like, I added it up, and the time just spent getting to and from work the first year, if I would have worked a year there, I would have spent 2 months of my life sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
That's not a life.
No, it's not.
So I got back, and I had a great time and everything else, and then I picked up and left, and I went back home. So, again, I'm returning back home. I've been back to my parents' place more than I've ever should have, but I was kind of just young and just wanted to adventure kind of thing.
Go try things.
And so I came back here, and I did some part-time jobs. I worked shipping in the silversmiths for a while, and my dad goes, hey, we're going to go down to Reno to the Safari Club International show. We're big hunters and everything else. He's like, why don't you come with me? Like, we can go find something. I'm like, well, no, I don't know if I can. I said, I got stuff to do. He's like, let's come. He's like, we'll go. He's like, you need to get away. I'm like, okay, I'll go see a safari show, go see all these cool mounts and all these cool, hunting clubs and country. And I'm like, this will be great. So we went down, and we're walking around, and I had no expectations. And we get to a spot, and there was a PSE. It's a precision shooting equipment. It's an archery company out of Tucson.
I've heard of it.
I've been a PSE shooter since I was a little kid. And actually, it just happened that we went by the booth, and we were talking to the guy. Well, they were doing a TV show on the Outdoor Channel. And I didn't know that. I've watched hunting shows, and I've always told my dad, I'm like, I could do that. I mean, I could do that show. I mean, all these hunting shows. And we end up talking to a rep, and he goes, hey, our video production department's looking for a new cinematographer and an editor. Would you be interested? And I'm like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, I don't have my resume with me. Let me go home and do it. And he's like, well, I'll put your name in. Pete Shepley is the creator of PSE, he's the owner, and everything else. Well, I get back home, and my dad goes, hey, your bow tech, Rob Seeley, is a rep for PSE. He's like, just have Rob call him. He knows him real well. So I get home. I didn't turn in my resume. Rob called Pete directly, and Pete goes, he's hired.
Wow. Just said, he's our guy.
And literally from landing to moving down to Tucson was 2 weeks.
Wow.
So and it was the worst time of year.
Good thing your dad talked you into that.
Yeah, well, and he went with me. It was a blessing. And so my mom took some time off, and we drove through Cheyenne and everything during the snowstorm. It was like, I think it was in April or something. I mean, the roads were awful. So, I mean, we had a trailer. I mean, I got all my stuff packed up from Wyoming, and we moved down there, and I get set, and I spent 2 years working on the Outdoor Channel.
Awesome.
I traveled the world. I became really good friends with Pete, the owner. I ended up becoming his number 1 cameraman. So anytime he took off on a hunt.
So what kind of places did you go to then?
I spent a month in Zimbabwe.
Wow.
So Pete was an archery hunter, and he was trying to complete his Big 5, which is the big predator. So it's lion, leopard, elephant, hippo, and Cape buffalo. And he hadn't been able to take an elephant with a bow, which is a hard feat to do anyways, because it's not been allowed forever. In Zimbabwe, it had been shut off because everyone thought elephants were, on the verge of endangered.
Yeah.
It's not true. I've got video still today when we were in Zimbabwe, because we went to Victoria Falls. So I've seen Victoria Falls. So I see one of the natural wonders of the world.
Yeah.
If I would have had 5 more minutes, my boss was going to let me bungee jump off the Victoria Falls bridge.
Oh my gosh.
But we didn't have enough time. They had the old hotel where they still had the old white suit, and they still did the train ride out to Savannah, and you could have this dinner tour. I mean, it was very, very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard about it, but I mean, I'm from Montana. This is nothing I expected. So he wanted to finish his 2, so he needed a Cape Buffalo with just a rifle or with a bow, because he'd shot ones before, but they had to stop him with a rifle, and they don't consider that a booked, just a archery hunt.
Okay.
So, and he'd done that with an elephant before. He shot an elephant, but then they shoot it, and then he's like, I can't put this in the book as an archery hunt because you shot it, you know?
Yeah.
So you wanted to do that thing. Well, this part of Zimbabwe had shut down hunting for like 15 years just because their government is really bad. I mean, you know, just turmoil and all this
corruption
stuff. A lot of corruption. I mean, you know, a thing of Coke costs you $1 billion, whatever their money system is. I mean, because they ran it through the ground, you know?
Yeah.
Well, we found this through one of his guide friends. They were allowing a certain amount of elephants to be taken out again because the population had gotten overgrown. And I mean overgrown by the point of tens of thousands.
Wow.
So in Zimbabwe, it's a small country.
Okay.
Okay, it's not real big. Okay, so land-wise, with a mammal that size, they figured that the entire country, I think at the time, and my numbers are going to be off a little bit, I'm sure.
And what year are you there? You were there for how long? A couple months?
A month and a half. So it was 2007.
Okay,
2007. And
that's the year I actually moved here.
Yeah. So we got there. And so the country, they figured sustainably to have a good, healthy population was around like 30,000 elephants in the country.
That sounds like a lot.
It does, but I mean, it does. But when you hear that the number when I was there, they figured it was closer to 50 to 60,000.
Wow.
And the only reason I can say that with a lot of confidence, and I mean, I've had conversations with other photographers that are wildlife that go to different areas, because not every country's like that, you know, because of their laws and because conservation is a big thing. I mean, hunters pay and support conservation. We're the ones that keep them around. And they just let them get out of control. And so much so that I have, I don't know, hundreds of hours of footage that there is not a tree in this area that we drove. It was a national park. It was 20,000 square miles. There isn't a tree in that area over 6 feet tall.
Oh, because I bet you they just decimated them.
Elephants come in there and they eat everything after the grasses. So they would just decimate. I mean, there wasn't a lot of trees over 6 feet tall because they would eat them. Except the ones that had a lot of thorns. They wouldn't eat certain ones, but everything else was just chopped off forever. And so he did get his elephant. So I've got that on video.
Wow.
He shot it at 25 yards. He was shooting a new bows at the time. He was we developed a new bow that could shoot 350 feet a second.
Jeez.
And back then, the old bows were like 280 feet a second. So we made this new hypercam, which you see every new bow you see out there now has the new hypercam. It's their design. They came up with it. PSE had been beaten down the world by Matthews and some of the other big brand names. And they finally developed a bow that just kicked their butts and became the new thing. And now it's everywhere. But so he used that bow to shoot that elephant, and it actually was a perfect shot. It went between the ribs, because the ribs on an elephant are like a 2x4. So if he hits that with an arrow, to blow through that is, and you're not going to. Well, for what he made the right shot, because it went all the way through, and it was a quartering away, so it went all the way through, and the arrow went all the way through the elephant and hit the far leg. And you can actually, on the video, you can see the elephant lift its left leg up because the arrow went all the way through.
Oh my gosh!
It was an 800 grain arrow, so it had this big 2-blade, because you can't use 3-blade because can't get enough penetration. Because the difference between like a bullet, you know, the velocity, but the energy that travels down the arrow, so you couldn't have anything stop it. But it went all the way through. I mean, you got it in the heart and everything else.
And so is it just luck then to miss the ribs?
Yep. I mean, a lot of it. Yeah. So that's why they don't really like, some of the guides and stuff don't call it ethical. They'd rather just, I mean, the way they honestly shoot elephants, they just shoot them in the head. They don't see very well. They have really good eyesight or sense of smell and hearing, but they don't see well. So you can get close to them. We got into a lot of elephants. I mean, we were in thousands of them at a time.
Is that pretty intense?
It is. It's scary. I mean, because, we got the guys with the big double barrel rifles and stuff. Because,
to kind of protect you?
Yeah. Because, if they smell and they want to run you over,
yeah,
when we're 30 yards from them, it's like...
And they're fast.
Oh, yeah. Incredibly fast. I've got some charges on video where they charged our vehicles and stuff. But he was looking for a big elephant, for big ivory, right? So the lore is, there's not 100-pound elephants. So that's the ones you see that are really long and tall. Back in the early 1900s, there's not many of those elephants left because they've been poached. There's a couple in South Africa has got in their big park. I can't remember the name of it now. I'm going to kick myself, but they've got some 100-pound elephants. But those elephants have a pack of guards on them all the time, every day. There's 15 of them, so they don't get poached. It's the only way they can do it. So a big elephant considered in the books or for scoring wise is a 40-pound elephant is a big elephant.
So what do you mean by 40-pound versus?
So they weigh them. So they weigh the ivory. So
I see.
How thick the ivory is and how tall it is, it's by weight.
Okay.
Like if 30 to 40 pound was going to be a big one,
Yeah.
So that's what he was looking for because he'd taken others, but again, he wanted it in the books, and if he was going to do it, he wanted to do it right. So we ended up getting that elephant. So we shot it. Okay. It took us 5 days to get it, and it all became because of the government. So the elephant was on this ranch. It went into a national preserve, like it crossed the line of national preserve, and we had to wait for them to give us approval. Well, it's not like you can make a phone call and do it. It's got to go through literally telegrams, and it took forever to get it. But it really, from where he shot it to where it actually did, die and stuff, was probably it's still 2.5 miles. Elephant arc doesn't pump that much, and for it to, feel the effects of an arrow, it took a long time. But
wow.
But it just took longer for us to get approval. And I still remember it because by the time, we're in...
Are you guys camping out there?
No, we were in a lodge on top of a hillside. So we were in concrete, round huts with, the grass and everything else. But there was only chicken wire over the windows. And we had a pack of lions that lived down below the hill. And they're not scared of people. I had a lion charge us and stop 20 yards from us. She had no fear because they don't see humans.
Yeah.
This preserve, they don't really see. They don't have interactions. It was real
How'd you
wild.
sleep at night with knowing that you had a little bit of chicken wire between you and that?
Not very well. You ever heard of? I don't know if you ever heard a wolf howl at night, if anywhere out in the wild.
I have not.
But you've heard the videos, like the zoo where they roar and they go roar, roar.
Yeah.
Yeah, have them down there where you can feel it in percussion, and they're still a mile down below the hill, and you're knowing the only thing stopping to you is a window of this, 2x3 with chicken wire over it.
Oh my God!
I had an escape plan. If I ever heard footsteps out in my little hut, there was a table, and they had the big beam rafters up above. Because as a cameraman, I'm not allowed to have a weapon. So if I heard something, my thing was to go up here, and get to the very top of this hut. And just sit there and yell for my boss because he was hunting him, so he had his rifle, but I had nothing. I had a pocket knife. Crazy stuff. But that's scary.
I'd have been whittling a spear.
Oh man, that was a great. It was a great adventure though. I got to see a natural wonder, and the other one that was really scary was hunting the Cape buffalo because they're really really dangerous. But he ended up getting that too. But he got it all on film. Came back home and literally I was as a traveling cameraman, the reason I left PSE was that it was a drain because I love hunting too, but because I was filming it all the time, I never got to hunt. I spent many times in the Midwest and Illinois. I was in the Mossy Oak camp, so anybody in the Mossy Oak crew that you see on TV, I've been in camp with those guys.
Wow.
They're great. A lot of great stuff. I was in Rascal Flats was in one of the camps I was in. I've met Ted Nugent.
Oh, wow.
Just because my boss has known these people for years.
For you, you're on the job. And
it got to be kind of cool, but it was a lot of fun. There's some big names in the hunting industry that I was around that are still on TV. Lee and Tiffany is a big name. And I've been in camp with them and great people. I had a lot of great fun, a lot of laughs. Guys that you said, you would never realize that were rich.
Yeah.
And like I was telling you before, kind of briefly about Mossy Oak, like you would never realize that is it Toxie? Yeah, it's Toxie. Hayes, he's one of the co-owners of, I think, of Mossy Oak. He was the marketing director for Microsoft when it first launched. So when you go into Denver in Golden, Colorado, there's that house, there's a peak on the big hill up there. I don't know if you might have recognized from Boulder area. There's a house on top of a hill up there. It's like the biggest hill above Boulder where CU is. That's his house.
Wow.
He has 7 full-time employees just answering his emails.
I think back then, and I don't know if it's still that way, but I believe those guys were getting paid in stocks back then.
Oh yeah.
You know, they like those early guys, or before the company was just massive. I mean, they were giving him stocks that back at that time weren't worth that much.
Yeah, and I mean, you would never recognize him because, like I said, he looks like a Duck Dynasty guy, big beard, wearing Mossy Oak camo. You would never think he's a marketing genius.
Wow.
So he left them, and he actually is the one that really helped them push their brand, because what did Mossy Oak and these camo companies do? They branded or trademarked their pattern. That's what camo companies do to get their money. So he helped them with that and pushed their marketing. That's how they got the work, because the guys that he worked with, they were just hillbillies. They're Southern boys. They're just, doing their thing. And he helped them get big, helped them grow. And then at that time, talking about that video editing where I was at, where they were streamlining it, because YouTube was a kind of a thing. Because I did a lot of viral YouTube guerrilla marketing for our products on YouTube because it was becoming popular.
Yeah.
So we would do behind the scene videos where we would test other people's products and show ours and how it would blow through like ballistic gelatin and all that kind of stuff, just to hype it up, And so he was actually working in, which is now with the Outdoor Channel, but they were making their own server. He was building a server so they could have a whole hunting shows on their own server that you could just watch on like a pay for like YouTube channel.
Okay.
So it was kind of that first sequence of having an actual, server area that was just mainlining all these TV shows that they would custom do so they could get away from having to do them with like the Outdoor Channel and that kind of stuff.
I see.
So he wanted that network. I don't think he wanted to get so much away from the Outdoor Channel, but he wanted to be able to monopolize all their shows and make more content.
Yeah.
To have on these networks and servers where people would pay, like, well, now we have apps, but back then it was like a web address. I don't know if it was Mossy Oak.
Right.
TV.
Almost like a subscription.
Yeah,
to get in there and be able to see all that content.
$20 a month, because, I mean, if they showed just whitetail hunting, which is the number one animal filmed and shot around in the U.S., just that money right there is billions. Yeah.
Wow.
Billions of dollars. So, I mean, so I got to kind of see some of that ground floor, but I mean, a lot of great people in that industry.
That's fascinating.
Just had fun, but like I said, I got burnt out.
Yeah.
I had some kind of family down in that area, and my parents love coming down in the Christmas time, because I mean it's 70 degrees.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun. The hot days, I was kind of glad I was traveling on a lot of the hot days, because there was a couple months there where it never got below 100 for like 2 months, and got acclimated. My air conditioner ran nonstop, but
I'm
good times.
I'm familiar with that. I grew up in the Las Vegas, Nevada area, and I don't know, man. That's why I found myself heading up this way. It was just because of that. The heat was killing me.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and like I said, that's kind of how photography started getting in, kind of my first real professional take on it. Even though I wasn't a paid photographer, I was a videographer and an editor and a producer. And but when we take our new product out with Mossy Oak, because they were a sponsored company, we would do shoots. We do photo shoots. And since I was the only one with the camera, I started shooting stills. And so I had a lot of my stuff end up in ads. So my first magazine publishes were all in Mossy Oak ads with PSE kind of combined, that we give to our departments and the stuff. So we'd create content and take pictures and do the whole kind of thing. So that kind of was really my first start, I would say, in photography. So that was around 2008. And that's why I always say I kind of got established in 2008, because it was right at the tail end that I was really starting to get into photography.
See, I didn't realize that you had all this background and all this, and I've gone to your website and I've looked at that, and I see that you have some examples there of product photography, and I was amazed. I was like, oh wow, this stuff looks super sharp. This looks like really professional. I just figured you were just kind of homegrown photographer who dabbled in it and has been just, putting this together, because I didn't have any of that information about your background on that, but I looked at it and I was like, that looks super professional, and now I get why, because
Yeah, I had a background in it. Yeah. So, like I said, I've always been in marketing in some form. I've always worked for marketing companies. I mean, I think that's just natural. If you do video or any kind of photo stuff, marketing is going to have to be part of your skill set. So I've got that, and now I'm aging myself, but I've almost done it for 25 years. So, wow. So that was a great start, though. I mean, like I said, we got to work with Nikon. I got to work with a lot of popular brands, Swarovski, taking pictures and stuff. Not officially for them a lot of times, but I was taking pictures of the products that we use for advertising. So, in a kind of back way, I got to kind of do that stuff, browning materials, a lot of outdoor stuff, because that's where I was. And then I down there, because I was around a lot of flight stuff, I got to work with a couple different airline companies. And do different videos. There was one where I'm trying to think of the name of it now. Just kind of skipped my head. I forgot. But anyways, it's on my website. But I created a 3D animated video for them. So it was a plane, because what they wanted to do was help firefighters, and so they wanted to convert 747s to be water droppers.
Okay.
Because it's not what they use now. They don't use that big of a plane. Because they're always afraid that a plane that size flying that low and that slow dropping water would be just, disasters could happen. And so I kind of helped them, show kind of 3D illustrations of doing that. And then there was another guy that was in that same thing, and they wanted to use airships. The old, we call them blimps.
Oh, okay.
But airships. Yeah, the old blimps were just fire hazard back in the war, right? Because they were filled with helium.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't take much to light one of those up, and it's
gone.
It's gone,
seconds.
Right? Well, they don't use that technology anymore, but I mean, they still had airships when they're doing football games, right? The blimp shots.
Yeah.
Well, he had thought of an idea, because the blimps can actually carry a lot of weight, that he could make 4 or 5 ballast tanks that you could drop into a lake for a fire. And then as one was filling up, because they would have slots and they had floats, you could go down with the airship, because they don't move super fast. You could go down low, you could hook them up, bring them into the plane at the airship, and then the airship could float over to thing. But the great thing about that is, like, planes have to just drop and run.
Yeah.
Where he had developed an idea of using different size, almost like slides that had an articulating arm that were 100 feet long. And so you could use it just like a fire hose. So you could literally fly over to an area and sweep back and forth and empty a whole tank.
Be a little bit more direct with it.
Direct it. And the other thing that he was using it, the idea for, was that, a lot of times when you have your hot shots, guys jumping out of planes and landing, well, you wouldn't need to do that with this airship, because they could maneuver in, even in, I think he added up to like 50-mile-an-hour winds, that you could go in and keep those things steady. And it's a balloon. Yeah. Basically, just land and drop all your firefighters up and get them out. Wow. And so it was a good idea. So I did a lot of the animation for that kind of stuff. And that was just kind of another thing where I was taking pictures for him, trying to help him get grants and get this through government approval. I never did get that far, I don't think. I've never seen anything past that. But I have seen some 747s that they've converted to be water droppers. Wow. So, that was kind of cool. Taking that video where they took a runway and they went and water bombed it with that thing. Oh my gosh, so much water.
Really?
Oh, it's a ton. They just did like a runway out here. Yeah. 1 mile, whatever that is, 1 mile strip or whatever, and just hit it from end to end, and it was just soaked. Wow. Thousands of gallons of water.
I don't know. A few years back, I can't remember actually if it was 2000. I don't know. There was a big fire right out by our place out there. It wasn't the Derby fire of 06, but it was in like 2013 or 14. I think we had a big fire out there where I live out at Countryman Creek, and I got video of this guy coming in super low and coming right through our valley, and that plane seemed massive, but now that it wasn't 747. He came in and dropped retardant, I think.
Aren't those like a C-130? Or no? I don't know what plane type they are. I'm totally wrong on that. I don't remember. But yeah, they're not as quite as big as... Actually, do you remember probably a few years ago, right up by the rest area here on the way towards Billings, they had that fire that was on the hillside there?
Yes.
Up in Pinecrest?
Yep.
They hit one of those with a bigger jet. I don't know if it was a 747, but it wasn't a regular plane, I don't believe. I think there was footage of it somewhere. But yeah, it was a big jet that they had converted. Wow. To drop all that retardant, just to get that stuff out, because they hit it right out. For a while there, you could see the remnants on the interstate there. It was because they hit that whole hillside right there before the rest area to keep it from moving up into those people's homes. Crazy.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun though. I got to go and see all these planes and sit in them and get told how they do, and then try to go
and then try to put a visual representation of within the guide or tolerances that they're giving you.
Yep. And then, like I said, on the side, I was doing that. That wasn't in with the company. I just did on the side when I had some free time during the slower months and when we weren't editing for the TV show.
Yeah.
Because we had to do 24 episodes a year and everything else, so we had to create content. So I mean, I was gone. So the reason I left, I told you I got burnt out, that I figured out that my first year I was gone 161 days filming.
Oh man.
So over half a year. So
yeah.
Being away, I mean, it was fine because I was single and I could go anywhere, but I mean, it just takes a drag. Because I mean, when you're in hunting camps, I mean, you're in a tree stand at 4 a.m.
Yeah, it's not like going and clocking in at this such and such time. You're out there at the worst times, like because you're trying to catch them in the morning or in the evening or the whatever the conditions may be, and it's always constantly changing weather conditions, and you got to keep things clean, you got to keep things charged.
Oh man, and as a cameraman, I mean, like I said, yeah, some other place I've been to the Northwest Territories up in Canada.
Okay.
I've been to the Arctic Circle. We went there for a sheep hunt. I have a midnight sunset photo at my house.
Oh man.
A picture of me where I was hunting there, and I think it was July. Yeah, it was July, and the sun never set.
That's incredible.
Because we were up high enough, you know.
Yeah.
And so we had to sleep in tents, but I was so tired. But I remember, I mean, as a cameraman, my camera gear, just without any of my clothing or extra, backpacking gear, just because you're hiking up and down the mountains looking for sheep, my camera gear weighed 40 pounds.
Oh.
My backpack on average was 75.
Jeez.
So I remember that hunt that, we were hunting at all hours because it was light. There was no, they don't have hunting times. It's just dark. You can't hunt at dark. Well, there's no dark.
Yeah.
So we were hunting all hours, but I remember it was a 10-day hunt. The only thing that saved me is that my boss was a helicopter pilot. And so we got helicopter piloted and dropped off at our first location. We didn't have to hike from the river up to that, which I was really glad because it was a 5-mile hike and I would have had to hike with a...
Oh, that's, yeah.
I mean, I was in pretty good shape then, but I remember that hunt.
Still, that's ridiculous weight.
Oh, yeah. I remember that hunt, and that 10 days, I lost 21 pounds.
Jeez.
Just because we were burning, we'd hunt for 12, 14 hours looking for the right sheep, walking up, and it was tundra moss. So tundra moss works like a trampoline. So every time you take a step, it sinks and does this, and then sometimes it sinks and you hit a rock down below it. So, I mean, blistered feet and all that kind of stuff were just kind of the perils of it.
So you're just burning a ton of calories snacking all through the day. So
living off Cliff Bars.
Yep.
I can't eat a Cliff Bar to this day. It just gags me. And then at the end of the night, we'd have like mountain houses, like a 2,000 calorie mountain house. So I'd have probably maybe 2,500 calories that day, but I probably burned 7,000 calories climbing up and down the hills.
Oh, I bet.
So that's why I lost so much weight.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got back home, of course I hadn't shaved for 10 days, and talk about the first hot shower you have in 10 days. I was taking glacier showers up there.
Had to be glorious.
Oh,
I'm a hot shower guy, man. I can spend some time in a hot shower.
So, they have these remote cabins because, you're at the middle of nowhere, and they took a big 200-gallon metal drum, put it up on a hill, and put a fire under it and heated the water, and then they just had tubing systems that ran down to a shower, and then they had cold water feed in from the other side, so you just have to turn the dials because gravity fed. Okay. And you'd have to figure out, so if you turn it on too hot without any cold water, it'd scald you because they couldn't temperature. They just built a bonfire under it, warmed it up. But I tell you what, that first shower, after 10 days of just taking, bath showers with the washcloth, standing in glacier water, that was really cool, though, when you started to think of where you were.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe a few thousand people don't have seen this location ever. No one had touched that water, been on that glacier ever.
I know. It was really cool. Ice for 1,000 years, like 15 minutes ago, and now it's water.
Ice cold, but you wake up when you take those quick showers in your underwear and just with a washcloth and trying to get clean enough so you can last 10 days and then go get that first hot shower. Man, nothing better. Nothing better.
It seems like things taste better, though, while you're out there, too, though.
Oh, yeah.
Or you're drinking, do you guys have coffee and everything else? To me, coffee tastes better when you're out in the woods and you're camping. I don't know why, but certain things like that, hot food, just taste better out there.
I think that it comes down to need. When it's so easy, when you turn on a faucet and you can have water, purified water, you can have coffee. And when it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and have, I think it always tastes better.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, the water up there, people are like, when did you have to filter it? And I'm like, no, this water hasn't been touched in a million years probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it's coming out clean. It's cold. It was crisp. It tasted delicious.
Oh, man.
You know, we got one reprieve like about day 6. We'd eaten through our mountain houses, and they had a local camp chef, and the helicopters up there were actually dropping off people looking for diamond spec mines from Canada.
Yeah.
And so they were always flying over. So when they'd have one land there, they would ask him like, hey, can you do a drop over at this base camp where our hunters are for us, because you're flying that direction anyways. Well, we got lucky that one day they did. It was day 6, and she'd made a fresh loaf of bread. Oh. And she'd made homemade raspberry jelly, but it didn't have a lot of sugar. It was just fresh raspberry. I mean, it was all jellied, but it didn't have the the pectin or whatever to make it real jelly.
Right.
And she just took peanuts from a can of peanuts and made like her own peanut butter. And they dropped it off the helicopter from like 50 feet. They just flew over and dropped a bag. That was the best peanut butter and jelly sandwich I've ever had.
Oh, I bet. It sounds good right now.
Oh, I mean, it was delicious. I mean, because I've been living off Cliff Bars.
I know.
And I've eaten the same turkey chili or stroganoff from Mountain House. And I mean, now the ones that today are so much better. They taste way better.
They're getting better at it. The Cliff Bar thing too, though, they're just, I don't know. I know they're better than some other bars and things. They're just dense. There's just something, I don't know if it's an aftertaste. I don't know. I'm not trying to bag on Cliff Bars, but I've eaten quite a few of them myself. But it's just not something, though, that I can just like, oh man, I sure am jonesing for one of these. It's like it fills a need, but it's not something that I'm jonesing for ever.
Yeah, my stepson's a rock climber, and he's into Cliff Bars, and we bought a bag of it. And I'm sure they're better because they've had to improve their taste from back then, but back then they were just, I mean, I think it comes down to when you're eating them to just try to feel some kind of nutrition in you. Yeah. And you're eating 2 or 3 of them, they all just taste like blah. I mean, they don't have the rich taste you're looking for, or your brain seeking, I guess. Yeah. And I just couldn't do them anymore. So, I mean, like I said, I to this day, if you couldn't hand me a Cliff Bar, I couldn't get it down.
Shoot, I had a whole case of them back there. I was going to have one sitting on your table for you. Glad I didn't bring those out.
No, but like I said, it was a great adventure, and you know, it just kind of, that part of my life was a lot of fun just because I got to go to places like that. I mean, I was in all over, I was in Quebec, I was in all over the States, anywhere you can imagine for hunting videos. But I just get to travel and punch my ticket. And so I've been to Africa. My dad took me after I graduated high school for a hunting trip. So I've been to Africa twice. You know,
that's awesome.
I've been to Australia. So I've been around the world. I mean, this year, my family's I'm finally going to get to Europe. So my family's taking a trip to Greece. So
nice.
I've almost got all the continents. Except the frozen ones. I don't know if I would ever want to go to those. But
did you spend a bunch of time in Australia, or was it a quick trip?
I actually.
And did you get into the outback, or were you in town?
I was actually in both. So actually, this is interesting story. So this happened right after 9/11 is when I went in 2001. So my dad's high school classmate that I was kind of working for part-time when I was going to school. I was basically just a nanny. He had 3 kids, and I was working jobs, and I was struggling trying to keep up with my artwork and video work. And so he just said, hey, work one day, just run my kids around to tennis camps and whatever. And he's like, well, help pay your rent or whatever. And I'm like, perfect. It was a great gig. Plus I got to go to hockey games, and he just spoiled me. He's like my other dad. Love him to death. But he was also the head psychiatrist for United Airlines. So he had a practice up in Aurora. And so he would help pilots that would, get into some kind of trouble, whether it was they didn't pass a drug screening or they had, divorces or whatever. So he would counsel them and help them try to maintain their flight license, because they had really high standards, and they still do. And so after 9/11 happened, I mean, I remember where I was. I was in class. I had a 7 a.m. class. I walked into class, and my teacher comes wheeling as fast as he could with his TV and plugs it in. And we flipped it on, and it was the exact same moment the second plane hit the tower. And of course, we're in Denver, so we have the trade center's just downtown. It's only 5 blocks from us. So the school announcement comes on. It's like, everyone go home, stay away from downtown streets. We don't know if there's an attack, I mean, it was just commotion, right? So we went through all that. Well, his family had planned to go to Australia because they're big tennis fans. They were going to go see the Australian Open. And he goes, I can't go for the full time. He goes, do you want to go and be a chaperone and help my wife out? So I get to go for a free trip in Australia, and all I have to do is watch the kids and haul luggage around, and heck yeah. So that's how I got to go.
That's awesome.
So I got blessed with that. So we did. Awesome. So we went, gosh, man, I would love to go back. Sydney was cool. So we landed in Sydney first. We stayed there. Got to go in the Opera House, go around the British Gardens around there, been on the big harbor bridge. I actually went fishing out there. We did a fishing day out there. So we spent a few days in the city there and just walked around. Absolutely gorgeous.
Wow.
Gorgeous. The garden around the famous Opera House is just mind blowing. That British Garden is huge. And then the Opera House is amazing too.
Yeah.
If we wouldn't have had the kids, his wife Jennifer and I were going to go in and watch they had shows going on.
Yeah.
And I don't like opera, but I'm going to see an opera in the Opera House.
Of course.
It's legendary. I mean, it's an icon for the country.
Yeah, just the experience.
Oh, yeah. So then we went from there, and then we went all the way north to Perth, to Northern, and we did the Great Barrier Reef. I got video of me acting like a dork underwater, scuba diving around the Great Barrier Reef.
Wow.
There's a video of me touching a clam probably the size of this table.
Jeez.
And because the guy would tell you what you could touch.
Uh-huh.
And they don't close real fast because they're so big, but they close. But when you felt the inside of I guess they call it the meat of the clam.
Yeah.
Feels like velvet underwater. You want to talk about a sensation underwater that you're not expecting? It was cool.
Yeah.
The other one that was cool is like the sea anemone, like the clownfish and stuff.
Yeah.
You touch it. It feels sticky when you're underwater because you're getting stung, but because their stingers aren't big enough, you're not getting hurt, but it feels sticky underwater.
Wow.
Some of the cool things.
I've seen plenty of them. I've just never touched them.
Yeah, and it was cool because they let us kind of touch this little part there. But the most vibrant colors I've ever seen in the ocean. I mean, coral with the brightest, blues and purples, and just there were sharks around there, had little reef sharks and stuff. But it was just so cool because I mean, it's another natural wonder world. And in my head, when I was swimming there, I'm like, okay, so I've seen Victoria Falls, and I've seen the Great Barrier Reef. Like just one of the wonders of the world. I've seen 2 of these things already.
Man, you're on a roll.
I'm from Montana, man. This is amazing. So I got video of that. That was a lot of fun. And then we ended up being back in Melbourne for the tennis open. So I got to see and I'm not a tennis fan. I mean, I've played tennis. I mean, they're still a real big tennis family. But yeah, so I saw
my firstborn son is Andre, named after Andre Agassi.
There you go.
And my youngest is Connor Daniels, named after Jimmy Connors.
Yeah, so we were there in 2002. So it was the 2002 Australian Open. I got to got tickets, got to go see. They saw more matches than I did. I saw I think 4 or 5 matches. I can't remember even who did. Rafael, I think, what was his name? Nadal, and then I was rooting for the German guy. I think it was Tommy, something with an H. Anyways, I was rooting for him because this guy was just German. I didn't know any. I mean, I wasn't big in tennis, but I was like, again, I'm like, if I'm here and I'm getting into this stuff, I'm going to go see this.
Yeah.
But at that same time, was it when the first Lord of the Rings launched?
Oh.
That's when it first came out. Right when we went there in January. It's right when, because it opened in Christmas.
Yeah.
And I already saw it at home, and I was sitting there, and I'm like, I had 2 days where there wasn't a lot of going on, and they were doing things, and the city, Melbourne's a big city. I mean, when you fly in, all you see is towns and homes. Same thing is because it's so flat, you just see buildings for as far as you can see. Even in the plane, 10,000 feet above, so I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I'm like, oh man, there's a cool movie theater down here. I'm going to go see the Lord of the Rings. So I went and saw it in this old theater. Well, I didn't know this old theater I saw was like the oldest theater in Melbourne. So it was all really old and had old pillars, and they did the drapes up and everything else. It's like a Chinese man theater,
Yeah.
This is pretty cool. Not that I knew that's where I was going to be later in life, because this is before then. So I got in there and I watched the movie, and I had a great time by myself. I think there was 10 people in there, because it was middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday, and everyone else was working the city.
Yeah.
And then I just pretty much spent that time and the rest of the time just walking around and looking at architecture and talking to people and trying things. I'm okay trying new things like food and stuff, so I'd go on an adventure and try food. Brits don't make really great food. That's all I'm gonna say.
They're not known for it, no.
No. That's how I don't understand how Gordon Ramsay got so famous, to be honest with you, because they just it looks good, but it just doesn't have flavor. Okay, so in Australia, one of their things is they would make potato salad. So it was really heavy on the mayo. So it was basically just a mayo, really heavy mayo-based potato salad.
Okay.
And they would do the same thing with corn salad. They would just put mayo in it and onions and some seasoning, and they had it as another side salad for like a lot of their dishes when we were down there. It was weird. I mean, it was like, I was expecting to have like some, taste, something different. And so eventually, one of my Tuesdays, I was like, okay, it was like after that first week, because we were eating kind of the same bland food. It just doesn't have a lot of spice or flavor. I mean, you could go, if you want to make a business in Sydney, if anyone hears this from Sydney, learn how to make an Alfredo sauce and go nuts. Because
you'd make a killing down there.
Oh my God. We went to an Italian restaurant and they had red sauces, but they had no cream sauces whatsoever. I'm like, are you serious?
I wonder if it just doesn't take off down there. I wonder if they've tried it and the people just don't react to it.
Maybe that is. It's all red sauces and like butter and wine sauces. And I'm like, man, bring an Alfredo down here and make a fortune. But so
I went to Iceland and I was talking to a lady and she's like, well, what do you do? And I was like, you know what? I have a breakfast burrito food trailer. And she's like, well, what's a breakfast burrito? I'm like, I was explaining it to her. She's like, that doesn't sound good. And I was like, they just don't do that there. Mm-mm. Like, that's just not on their radar.
No.
I was like, oh, actually, really? Breakfast burritos are a big thing in the U.S. and we kind of have our own play on it. She was like, okay, sounds good. Doesn't sound good. I probably wouldn't even try it. Mm. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, you just think like certain things are just standard, Oh, yeah. And across the board. But certain cultures, I don't know, that's just not on their radar.
No, it's just how we live, because we have a good friend of ours that lives up in Switzerland, and he comes and stays all the time, and he's toured around. He'll fly into Calgary and he'll rent a car, and then he just drives around, and he's been all over. But he's been, when he comes and eats with us and that kind of stuff, their portions are small. I mean, for him and his family, they got, like mini fridges, because they have fresh markets every day. They go out and buy their stuff fresh for their meals every night. They don't store it. Leftovers aren't a thing,
So they're not setting any records for societal obesity over there?
Well, that, and they walk everywhere. And everywhere up there, it's closer, though. They don't have the expanses like you do. And that's what he'll tell you if you were here. He's like, you guys have space. He's like, everything we have, is in walking distance.
Yeah.
So we walk. And he's like, and, petro, by the liter, it was like $3 a liter.
Yeah.
So what's that? I don't know what, almost $7 a gallon.
That's what we paid in Iceland, was like $7-8 a gallon.
Yeah. And so he's like, they have a car, but they don't use it unless they're going like to go visit family across the country. Other times they're biking or they're walking. And so he's like,
or they grab a train, or they grab, But
it's set up different, because we just, I think this is personal, but I think it'd be cool if we had some of those bullet trains and stuff around here.
Oh, I do too.
Go from here, if I could get in a bullet train and go see my Avalanche play in like 6 hours, just be on a train and get down there, I'd probably be a ticket holder. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
Because you could go see them if you could just buy like a pass and just go. But I see that there's a lot of conflict on that. They've tried doing that over the years, but we just don't. We just have more space. There's space there. They don't. Everything is built up, and where you can't build is because there's mountains, or it's
Yeah.
So
it only makes sense though to have one of those types of trains. That, like, how much traffic could you get off that interstate over there, running up and down the between like Billings and then going on down to Denver, and then from Denver on down? Like, there should be, with every north-south interstate, there should be a rail with a passenger train system running.
How cool would it be? Like, my wife works for FIB, so she works here, but she works a few days in Billings at the main tower. Well, how cool would it be, like, when the roads were this bad and she had to go like 40 miles an hour with her Jeep because it's so bad, we jump on a train that doesn't get stopped by anything. Yeah. Really, unless it's 20 feet of snow, and be from here to Billings in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then get off a main hub in downtown and be able to, either create economy for, Uber drivers or whatever to take you to where things, or taxis. But I think it would create some stuff, but there's controversy. I don't know. Like I said, I think it always been cool. I'd love to be able, they still have the High Line. I still think they still run that train where it goes to Seattle and out there.
They do. In fact, it's funny you bring that up, because like 2 weeks ago, I was on their website looking at, I was going to just drive out to, my daughter lives out in Vancouver, Washington. And we were thinking about going out there to go visit her and her husband. And I thought about it. I was like, hey, what if we just drove up and grab the train and have her. And because you can do that, makes it a longer trip, but I don't know. We were looking at that just the other day. We still might do that, but I used to be a track inspector for BNSF up on that rail. There's actually double main track or 2 main lines up there. And they up on the High Line, there's 2 Amtraks a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, that come ripping through there at 79 miles an hour. I know that because when I was super new at it, all of a sudden I was like, it was the holiday weekend and everybody's gone and I'm filling in. And I called a buddy of mine and I'm like, hey man, can you believe, like, he'd also hired on with BNSF about the same time as I did. We were brand new track inspectors and we're up there and I'm like, dude, can you believe, like, we're in charge of, finding defects in the rail this weekend and putting slow orders or, whatever. Like, there's like passenger trains up here ripping along at almost 80 miles an hour. And like, they left us to, like, I was from Havre heading west for like 50, 60 miles. And he was from Havre heading east. We were 2 new guys watching the rail up there. And I don't know. It was super stressful, but I couldn't believe that I didn't feel like I had a massive amount of, training on that. And then it's your job is to make sure you identify the defects and put the proper amount of slow orders on, measure things and go by all these measurements and tolerances, and based on these measurements and tolerances, how fast should a passenger train go across it, how fast should a freight bearing train go across it, and then call into dispatch in Fort Worth, Texas, and put the appropriate slow order on there. Anyway, so they run double main and they run fast up there. And I have been wanting to do that trip for years since I was up there doing that track inspecting. I would see those guys come through there, and then I know they go all through, they continue right across northern Montana, and it's just beautiful scenery. And to be able to just hang out on a train car and, sipping some coffee or head down to the...
Are you a baseball fan?
I just don't really follow any big major sports anymore. I grew up as a baseball fan.
So we have a good friend that was also a dentist out of Forsyth, and before his dad passed away, they used to do baseball tours. So they'd get on here and they'd get on the trains and they'd go all the way to Chicago, all the way to Boston on the trains, and they'd watch games at each of the major stops. So they
wow.
Parks and stuff.
That would be so great.
So he did it, and he goes, it was great because they got, he goes, the great thing about it is they got to meet people. So they take their little cooler, whatever, with sandwiches and books, and because they read a lot in cards, and they'd play cards, and they'd go and meet people, and
that'd be awesome.
Walking down on train. He's like,
I could
there's
totally
no stress.
That.
He's like, it was a 12-hour ride. He's like, you could sleep in your little, sometimes they get the little personal car, so they had their own little spot, and you just sit there, and then they go and they had I think that one he said still had like some food service or something, or drink service or whatever, so they'd go up and just mingle and talk to people, and he's like, I met great people. And he's like, my dad and I, he's like, great time because we were big baseball fans, and they would see like, I don't know, 5 or 6 games on that 2 or 3 week long trip, but they would just ride the train all the way from the High Line all the way. I think it goes east still, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. It goes all the way out to the East Coast.
Yeah, so they ride all the way to the East Coast and they watch baseball. So
yeah, I think like with Amtrak, you can pretty much only run east-west from like Washington over to the East Coast, and then across the north, and then in the middle you can go from like Salt Lake City. I'm not sure if from Salt Lake City if it goes all the way to California. It probably does, but there is a route that runs across the middle of the country, and there's a route that runs across the south and then back. And then there are on the West Coast and on the East Coast, there's trains that run up and down north and south, but I don't think that there's really much in the middle.
No.
So,
and like I said, it would just be nice for especially like, when you have winter storms and that kind of stuff, transit and stuff. And again, if it were not such just like a regular rail, but more of a high speed rail and stuff. I mean, if you drive to Denver, it's going to take you 8.5, 9 hours with traffic now, depending on roads and everything from here. It's 600 miles, but if you get on a train and do that in 3 hours, 4 hours, and you could be there, I mean, that's nothing. I mean, that's like going from here to Missoula.
Yeah. I think but I don't really know. And I don't, so I'm kind of speaking out of turn on this, but I believe that what it is people are concerned, or there's industries that are concerned that, that's going to quit people pulling off the interstate and the money that comes into these towns, or that comes into, all these service stations, everybody pulling off. There's a lot of money in gas and diesel and everything else. And so I think there's forces I don't know.
Yeah, and that's a major concern. But I mean, again, remember this town what was this town first? It was a train stop.
It was a train stop.
So I mean, you got those established. But again, if you just had them even where you were stopping, everything else where people get on and off, I still think you'd still have commerce. But I mean, I get it. You got oil industries and other stuff. But
even if they didn't stop at every one of these little towns, like I get it. Maybe there was a stop in Billings, Bozeman, the main places.
Yeah.
Like that would even be nice.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind going to Billings to go grab the train to go someplace else or something if I had to. But.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, that's it would be fun to have some of that kind of stuff. Just I don't know. It just somehow in my brain it always seemed like it made sense, but I guess there's a lot of logistics and all the work. But I mean, again, like I said, just hearing, I've never ridden the trains far, but I've had friends, and like I said, our good friend, he said he was great. He's like, he's like, yeah, it was long. He's like, but I didn't have any stress about driving, focusing. He's like, I was drinking beer, and playing two-hand poker, and making friends with everybody. And he's very chatty, so he makes friends. So it was fun.
And it's actually a surprisingly really smooth trip. I served in South Korea for a little bit, and we had to ride the trains over there a lot. And they weren't that smooth. They weren't that nice or whatever. And they have really nice trains over there. Mm-hmm. But the trains that I did, my that I rode around on were more like subways almost. And they weren't that great. But one time up on the High Line, this is why I don't have that experience with Amtrak either, but I got to ride in this federal, it's kind of it's an inspection train. And what happens is that train car, the feds they have their own train car that comes along and measures certain things about the track. So BNSF has to provide an engine to pull this thing through the territory. And since I was a track inspector, like as it came through my territory, I was to ride on that car with that federal inspector. And it wasn't a big deal, but it was more like I then had to have another inspector out there who I could radio. So as he's measuring, it's fascinating. I couldn't believe that they could do this, but it's measuring things about the track as it's cruising along at 40, 50 miles an hour. And we're riding along, just floating along smooth. And there's tons of windows all over this thing and great views. And there was this big stainless steel, I guess if you called it the galley or whatever, everything's all stainless steel appliances in there. And he's like, oh, go help yourself. And I'm like, I go back there was like tons of food and drinks and everything in there. And I'm like, that's my tax dollars. I'm filling up, man. Right. So we're riding on this car through there. And it was like completely like all like leather interior and just super comfortable. And that guy had the best job ever. He was just super chilled guy. And as this thing is going, and it looks like almost like a polygraph test, but it's identifying the actual mile marker to a 100th or a 10th or 1,000th of a percentage or a point for the location of where we're at. It could tell me, and then I could radio to somebody like, hey, it's showing this. Can you go and physically go measure this? And if so, we need to get a crew out here to address this issue. Anyway, at that point, I was like, this is so smooth, and this thing was just floating along. It was so nice. And ever since then, I caught that bug, and I'm like, man, I got to do the High Line. I watch train videos all the time about different places to go and to go see those places. But
yeah, be cool. Anyways,
I never get out of here. We just make breakfast burritos and watch train videos on YouTube.
Right. Yeah. So like I said, that was all my travels there. But I came back home here in 2008 is when I finally came back, and I haven't left since 2008. I haven't moved away. But so I left Arizona after that.
Do you ever get the bug to go back to working for those types of organizations and doing any of that? I mean, you're in a different phase of life now. Settled down, married, kids.
Yeah. I've thought about it. The series on Netflix, Meat Eater. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't.
It's a guy out of Bozeman, Steve Rennell.
Okay, I know that name.
Yeah, he's been on with Rogan a few times.
Yeah, I know he has a podcast out there.
Well, he's out of Bozeman, and he's done a travel series, a hunting kind of series on Netflix and stuff. And he had a position open up there, but I'd have to work from Bozeman, so it just doesn't work logistically, and I'm not into that. I mean, I like that world still. I mean, I love hunting and stuff, but I've also been a part of it, so I know how much work's involved and how strenuous it can be to do that kind of stuff. I mean, it looks like a lot of fun, and it is if you're not the cameraman and the editor. If you're just a guy that's out there just as the host and the hunter and stuff, your job is a lot easier than most. You get the comfort style. You're not hauling around 40 pounds of camera gear, and you're not doing all that stuff, and getting up and editing and doing that stuff while they're sleeping. And I mean, it takes its toll. It's a lot of fun. You get to meet, I mean, like I said, I will never say I'd regret it, because it was great. I met a lot of great people. I mean, actually, I kind of skipped one thing. Is I lived in Guatemala for 2.5 months.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when this is right after I left PSC, I came back home, and my dad was sitting there again, and he goes, "Hey, I'm going back to Reno to the sports show and everything else." He's like, "Why don't you make a editing video? Maybe we can find another hunting company and pick it up that's more local, or you can just be like a travel cameraman to go on, with people that have money to go to Africa and just film their hunt and just make it for them and just make my own business." So I had a kind of a side business for a little while. I kind of started called Oryx Productions. I made a logo and everything. I was just going to do video editing, hunting videos, And I said, okay. So I made a reel, and we had a friend that had a booth down there, and he let me set up a little TV, and I put out brochures and had a little video slideshow of some of the stuff I've done. And we were walking around, and there was this guy from a fishing company, and we were kind of talking to him. He goes, "Hey, you're a camera guy, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Why don't you come and work for me for a few months?" He's like, "I got all these high industry fishing people going down to Guatemala to catch billfish and marlin, everything else." He's like, "Just come." He's like, "Here," he's like, "Oh,
just come."
He's like, "Charge them whatever you want to go out and do a day thing." He's like, "Just make them a little video. Do you think you can make them like a little video before, they got a 3-day trip, film them for 2 days, and on the third trip before they leave in the evening, you could just give them a disc and they could just take it home with them?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, sure. No problem, So I flew to Miami, and then I flew down to Guatemala, and I went to Guatemala City and everything else. Again, I'm seeing country I'd never seen. So now I'm getting my Central and South America stamp marked here too, my other continents. Pardon me. And so I land, and I get there, and they drive me down, and it's just, it's third world country, but I mean, the landscape is beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Just,
I bet.
Active volcanoes everywhere.
That's wild.
I think I went through like 40 or 50 small earthquakes.
Wow. Just
due to the fact that there was
so much volcanic activity. I didn't realize there was that much volcanic activity, I guess, down there.
I'm going to cough real quick. So anyways, so I show up to this fishing lodge. It's all razor wire, has guards, cement, beautiful inside. I mean, it's a 5-star place. Start meeting all these captains. There's one from South Africa. There's one from Australia. There's one from New Zealand. There's one from Hawaii. The Hawaii connection was kind of, his name was Chris Sheeter. He was my favorite because his dad actually ran the boat rental from Yellowstone Lake.
Okay.
So so we had a little bit of a connection. So we really bonded right off the bat. He's like, my dad had it was like Joe's Marina or something. I can't remember what it is, but he ran the charter where he could charter boats right out of Yellowstone Lake up in the park. And I'm like, well, that's cool,
Yeah.
And he's from Hawaii, and just great guys. And so I spent 3 months, on the boat with, you've seen G. Loomis rods in the store, like
yes.
Shakespeare, but G. Loomis,
yes,
Gary Loomis. I've worked with Gary and Kathy Loomis on the boat.
Wow.
I didn't know who they were. They show up, and I get this client list, and I'm like, Gary and Kathy Loomis, why does that sound familiar, Gary? Is that G. Loomis rods? And like, oh yeah, the one and only. I'm like, good. Well, they're big African hunters, so we start talking about all my Africa trips that I've been on and everything else. So I spend 2 days on the boat filming him and his wife catching, a ton of sailfish.
Were they using their own rods though?
Oh yeah. They weren't messing around. So, and that was its own thing. I didn't know if I was ocean sick or get seasick because I've been out, rafting and boating here, but we were out on these boats. They're 20 to 32 foot fishing boats with the swing arms because they tease them in, and then what you do is you take a bait and you drop it behind the boat and you let it out, and then the fishing mates pop the teaser over it and they switch the bait basically, and then they bite it and you hook them. Well, they use a circle hook because that hook, like a J hook, won't get down in the throat and it won't kill them. So what it does, it goes up and it slides, but because of the way it's so rounded, it catches the lip, and you usually catch them
just right there.
So they all only did catch and release.
Okay.
But these fish, sailfish, and I'd never seen one until the first one jumped in front of me from like 15 feet behind the boat, and I'm holding a camera as it's rocking, trying to, learn my balance and how to film on the ocean, which was a whole new skill set that I had to learn. But I mean, these fish go from 60 pounds to 180 pounds. And my first day, I thought we were gonna have to go way out in the ocean. We were 4 miles from the dock. I had 4 guys on my boat. They caught 85 sailfish.
Wow.
And they set records down there. It's the #1 place in the world to catch marlin and sailfish.
I think I got into a rabbit hole on YouTube watching guys with sea kayaks out there catching marlin. I saw a dude catch this marlin that dragged him like 15 miles out, and he had to radio in. They had to send a boat out to he brought the thing. He fought it for hours in a kayak. Yeah. And incredible. I think the thing weighed, I can't even remember, it was like hundreds and hundreds of pounds. It was they weighed it. I don't know how they weighed it, but they somehow weighed it and were able to let it go.
Yeah.
And but he fought that thing for hours. I watched that YouTube video. It was like 45 minutes, and then I was like, I gotta buy a sea kayak, and I went down that rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. Anyway,
yeah. So I mean, that was an adventure because not knowing anybody in that fishing industry. I mean, I knew some names and that kind of stuff, but I can account and attest for that. I've worked for everybody really big in that big fishing world, So the owner of Penn Reels sold his company and told me I worked with him on the boat for a day. I worked with, oh my God, a guy that runs Shakespeare rods, ugly sticks. Yeah, I was on the boat with him. So all these guys just came through and through because it's the fishing destination to go. And I learned a lot. I had so many hours on the water and helping drive the boat that I could have got my boat license for those ships. I could have taken the test and did it. But I saw things out in the water that as a kid, you never thought were real. Like, I didn't think flying fish were real.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're real. Yeah. And it's amazing how far they'll fly in front of the boat as you're going in the morning, like hundreds of yards, just flying along, and all of a sudden they dive. Well, that's the main bait for sailfish. They follow them. They like go and eat them. And I didn't think anything like, oh man, that's, flying fish. And out there, first day, flying fish. Second day, I see stingrays jumping out of the water, like just having fun. The boat spooked them. They're flopping in the water. More sea turtles than I've ever seen. You had to dodge them.
Wow.
And once in a while you can't dodge them, but you try to avoid most of them. And then I've got so much video that's on old digital video. I've got a video of a stingray that the best I can figure from wingtip to wingtip is 40 feet.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
The only reason I can say that is because I got up in the crow's nest at the very top of the boat because I wanted to go up there and see a different view. It's the worst place in the boat to be for trying to video,
right? Because
everything moves.
Yeah, you're at the top. You're at the peak.
Pinnacle. Yeah, but I'm sitting there, and every once in a while, the first time I ever saw a big manta ray like that was that I kept seeing this black fin in the distance because the water was glassy day and it was just rolling, and we were just slow trolling. And I'm like, what is that? And he's like, oh, it's a big manta ray. And I'm like, how big? And he's like, oh, they get really big here. I'm like, okay, whatever. And like 4 hours later, we go past that same spot where we kind of saw that coordinates. And I'm on top, and I see this shadow come from the side. I'm like looking and looking, and it goes behind the back of the boat. Well, it gets in line with the back of the boat because he stopped the engine, and it went right underneath the boat and came right out the back and went away from me. And it had wings on either side of the back of the boat. Well, the back of the boat across was 30 feet, and its wings were on the backside.
And
it was just
sticking out both sides,
just slow gliding away from us, and it dove down.
No wonder like sailors, throughout history just felt like or thought that there was just sea monsters out there. That's a monster. That's a sea monster.
I mean, yeah. I mean, and you're talking about marlin guys on kayaks. I mean, I filmed several species. Blue, black marlin ended up being the biggest. They're the big record holders that you see. Usually they're caught out of New Zealand. The biggest one ever caught, I think, last time I looked, was like 2,600 pounds.
Wow.
That they caught.
Jeez.
Fought it for 2 days to reel that thing in. So the way they do the fishing industry, they have the leader line. It's a kind of big yellow line that goes to the bait, and they call it a confirmed catch. The fishing mate has to reach out and touch that colored line So like when you're reeling in a big fish, to make it an official catch, the mate has to touch that line. So you got to bring it in far enough. It's like 6 feet long. Yeah, so you got to bring it in close enough to the boat.
So that line isn't all that color. It's when that color gets to this, you finally reel it into this distance.
And then if they can touch that color, which run from, like, it's like 6 feet long, so it runs from there down to the bait. And they call that a legal catch. So I saw guys.
How are they able to? I mean, do you have any idea how they're able to weigh those things? Like,
so
is it on tension off of the line or something?
No. A lot of it is just a lot of the captains have caught enough fish in their lifetime.
They're just eyeballing it.
It's kind of looking at. I think probably some ranchers can look at a heifer and go, "Well, that's 600 pounds."
Okay, that makes sense.
Pounds.
That makes sense then.
The only reason to make it an official for like a record book thing, you have to kill it.
Okay.
And so they were really into catch and release, so they don't really want to do that. I mean, they will if it's something like so grandeur that they're just like, okay, this is gonna break the book, you know.
Yeah.
I think that they'll do it, but a lot of times they don't.
Because I was wondering, because it was almost like I think I missed that part in the video. They were like, yeah, that was a such and such. It was a 700 or 800 pound marlin or something they were saying, and I was like, did I miss something there? Did they somehow get a weight on that? Because they sounded so confident about it that they said like an exact number that I was like, oh, how'd they weigh that thing? And I kind of didn't even go back.
Man, talk about fishing stories and lures. I got lots of them, but one of them was that the first marlin I ever filmed was about a 300 pounder, and it just came out of nowhere and just took the line and started running with it. They were just mates were just messing around. And it took that guy just because they would get up and it did do runs where they just sit there and splash and then they disappear. And so the captain's got to put the boat in reverse and you try to reel all that line in to get back in. Because, I mean, they'll stretch it for a long, long time. And that took him, I think that guy, and only one guy at a time can touch the rod. Because if you switch rods off, it's not a legal catch. They don't officially count that as a catch. So it's one guy on the line. And it took him 3 hours to do that one. It was 300 pounds. The biggest one I have on film is figures about 800.
Yeah.
And it's the spookiest thing I've ever seen, because I'm sitting there filming and we had sailfish come up because you can see their fin, and they glow, which is really another story in itself. But all of a sudden I see another wake like 10 feet behind our bait, because you can see them skipping on the water. And there's this wake like being created. And the captain's looking for it, and I tapped the captain he's Chris from New Zealand. I go, Chris, what the heck is that behind the bait? He looked around, and all of a sudden he just goes nuts. He's like, Marlin, Marlin, Marlin. So the mates drop a different bait back there. It's a bigger bait on a 50 weight rod, because the other rods we had were only 20 weight. He's like, I don't want to hook that thing on a 20 weight. It'll take us forever to catch it. So the other mate, there's 3 mates, and they're reeling in the other lines as fast. I mean, one's doing 2 at a time. He's got under his wrist, and he's just like this, reeling them in. The other guy's dropping out the big bait, and that thing raises up, and you can see the fin. I wish it would have been in the crow's nest, because you would have seen how long and big he was. And he came up, and he ate it, and his mouth was huge. It just smacked that bait down, and all of a sudden that line just started just spinning off that 50 weight. And I got video of him jumping in front of the boat, probably 100 feet behind the boat, and I mean, he is just massive, big black marlin.
That's
just
incredible.
Bang, 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 and then run. It took us 6.5 hours to pull him in.
Oh my gosh!
And I gotta find my photo somewhere. I got a picture, because I didn't have.
And the same guy has to stay on it.
Same guy, and his arms are just gel. He's in a rig, and he's just like, his arms are just gel. He'd take breaks. We'd feed him lunch, because this fish was still hunting its own food. It didn't really know it was hooked. That's how big it was. It didn't realize it was being dragged in. It just knew it had
tension. Didn't know that it was towing a ship around.
Yeah, if you didn't put any tension on it, it wouldn't try to take line, And so we got it in, and I got a picture somewhere, and I'm not kidding you, the eye on that thing is this big.
Oh, man. That's got to be spooky when it comes up to the surface.
Oh, my, and they get alongside the boat, and I don't remember how big that one is. It was 20 plus feet probably.
Jeez.
And the cool thing about those billfish, like marlin, swordfish, everything else, they have the same chemical in them as fireflies. So they literally glow.
Wow.
So when they get excited...
I didn't know that.
When they get excited, they glow. So their fins become this iridescent royal blue that when you're in the crow's nest and you see it come, you can see them coming. The other one that has it is it's mahi or dorado.
Okay.
You see they're kind of the big yellow and green. They're really a pretty fish. But when they get all excited, that's what makes them so vibrant in color. They get just glow, and like the fins, they glow, but within like 5 or 10 minutes out of the water, they turn white.
Oh, wow.
Because all that, it's like adrenaline. It just kind of dissipates.
That rush just goes away.
Yeah, but I mean, it was the coolest thing to see. Marlin, specifically when on the crow's nest, if it's dark enough, it looks like a snake coming at you because they're not completely, it's not like a line down their back. It's like these little dashes. So, and their fins glow. So you got these 2 glowing fins going like this, and you got these like dash lines going like this at you. So it looks like a big snake coming at you. So I mean, like, you're talking about sailors. Think about that back in the day when you're seeing crazy stuff like that. And then like the really pretty ones, like I said, my favorite fish to eat is the mahi.
Yeah,
I love it because we had electric grills, and so they would literally be flopping, and they would be putting those on there, and you'd eat them with lime juice and rice and guacamole. Man,
man,
I ate so good down there. I love fish back then because it was fresh. I mean, you can't get any fresher.
No.
So
it was just swimming just a few moments ago.
But to learn all that information about, you know, the billfish species that they glow, incredible. I mean, that knowledge there was just life changing because you just see it, and then when you're out filming it and you're up high enough, and you start to really pick up with the captains where they look at like flat water and they can tell where bait balls are. They can tell where these fish are going to be. And you start learning that, and then you start learning, because as a cameraman, it was important to me. It took me about a month to learn it, because then I knew where to put the camera, because I knew action was going to happen at that specific point, right?
Yeah.
So it took a lot of time, but when you learned it, man, it was so cool, because you would see it. Like I just went out there with some cheap sunglasses, and then of course everything was being brought in. So one of the captains, I took one of my tips from making these videos and everything, and one of his clients brought me some of those Costas.
Okay.
Because they blocked the light so much that you could really see deep. And then when I got those, it was excellent, because I mean, you know how awake in a boat you can't see, but they cut enough at the right angle that if you look right, you can see the fish coming up to the bait. So then I knew where to hook it, so I could see the bill come up, and I could see the splash down and them grabbing the bait. And so I had that timing down at the end, and I got really good at being able to balance the boat where my lower half of my body became my gimbal.
Okay.
And I just sat there, and I learned how to not like. So I mean, if you're watching a video and you're rocking like this the whole time, you're going to get seasick just watching the video. But I learned how to do that. And speaking
of seasick, how did you handle that going out there? Did that affect you?
I went out there and it didn't affect me at all. I got lucky. There was a couple times that we got some bad weather, and we had some big waves, like 30 foot.
Jeez.
It just like a squall came in, and at probably not the beginning I would have been able to do this, but when that squall happened, I went inside the cab, which everyone else was outside except for one other mate, and we both were on the benches and we were sleeping. Oh. And the boat was just rocking.
I would be nervous.
I mean, I could feel it. I mean, I was doing this in my sleep, but I was just I somehow got acclimated to it. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, but it was fun. I mean, you know, it again, just working with all those people. I mean, you'll see in the store here, like Mondavi Wines. Mm-hmm. I still have an open invitation from them to go visit their winery and stay at their cabin.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I have their business card. I reach out to them every once in a while and email. Robert Mondavi. Yeah, his wife was cool, and I filmed her. They caught him on fly rods.
Wow. So
they have 20-pound fly rods.
Yeah.
And it's not like fly fishing in the general sense. So what they do is they tease the fish in, because there's no hooks on the teasers. And so they get the fish within about 30 feet of the boat, and they stop the boat, and you take your fishing fly, and it's been dragging behind the boat while you're teasing them up, and you take one cast. So you take it and you throw it out, and it's this big pink, usually pink or blue fly, about like this.
Okay.
And what the mate does is he takes that teaser and he drags it right over the top of that fly, and then he pops it over the top of it while it's your bait and switch, and they go and grab it. But the great thing about that, they're 20 feet behind the boat, so when they start jumping, they're on their tails 20 feet behind the boat. It's the best action.
Oh, the best shots.
Oh, yeah. And they set that hook, and then, man, that fish goes nuts, and then they're just bang, 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 bang behind the boat, and they're reeling them in and stretching line. But that fly fishing was cool, just because you got to bring them in so close.
Wow. And that's what the Mondavis were doing?
Yep. His wife, she started with the traditional reels, 20-weight reels, where you just drop the bait in the water and you let the line out with your thumb, and then you just hold it, and then you feel the fish grab it, and you just pull straight back, and it hooks them. So she's like, well, my husband's catching them on fly. She's like, I don't want to be the only one not catching one on fly. I want to catch one on fly today. So I filmed her do it, and I gave them the whole video, and
that's awesome,
and everything else, and she was so appreciative of the video and everything else. She's like, yeah, she's like, if you ever want to do a wine tour, contact me. And she's like, I'll make a note of this. She's like, I won't forget you. And I'm like, she's like, I'm gonna keep this DVD. So I don't know, I haven't probably reached out in a few years, but I used to email every once in a while just to kind of touch base, just to say, maybe one day I'll go out there and do a wine tour.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, she's like, yeah, anytime.
Yeah, these aren't experiences that you just have every day, No.
That was cool. So like I said, I mean, my life experience, up to that point, I mean, I've been on several continents. I've seen things that, I mean, not a lot of people have. I've seen, humanity at some of its worst, seeing, when you're in Africa, you're, third world country. I mean, Mexico isn't even at that level in parts, but I mean, you get to it really opens your eyes up to how blessed we really are.
Yeah.
And how grateful we should be for the things we have. Because I mean, you see in real life, it's different. And then when you're like me, I got more of it because I wasn't just staying in a hotel. I mean, I was out with the people. So you really get to see the harsher ends of that part of life and how difficult it could be if you were there. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible how some people live, and the things that, well, like you say, the things that we take for granted here. But then when you get out there, it's incredible to see that there's a good portion of the world's population that lives at a different level.
Oh yeah.
And I can't imagine. I haven't been out to those types of places and seen that type of poverty, but at least not firsthand there. So it's got to be, I don't know, it's got to affect you.
Oh yeah, no, like I said, it helps you grow as a person, I think, because like I said, Guatemala was no better. I mean, bad drug trade, because I mean, in Guatemala, I mean, there's a landing strip behind our house, and I forgot to say, I kind of felt safe there because the Navy was there too. It was off I think it's San Jose port. There was a Navy ship off the deck. So when I'd take rides in the town, and I'd get little charge phones, little cards, so I could call back home every once in a while. I had internet. I could still email. But I ran into a bunch of Navy guys, on the bar. I went and got a haircut one day, and there's these, God, I think it was his name, Mike something, but he was not a captain. Oh, I can't think of it. Anyways, he was an upper ranking officer in there, and he gave me his business card, and he goes, how long are you going to be down here? And I go, well, I got probably till right before Father's Day. I was going to be there, go home for Father's Day. And he goes, well, he's like, if you ever get in trouble, he's like, this card on this phone, he's like, I'll send the seals for you. I went, hey, what?
That's backup.
Yeah. He's like, I'm like, SEALs. He's like, well, probably not the SEALs. But he's like, I'll send some high level officials to come get you. But yeah, he gave me his direct cell line onto his boat, that if I needed a SOS call, like stuff was happening and I didn't feel safe, or something was going down, just, drug trade or whatever was going to happen. He's like, call this number. He's like, I'll have a boat.
Were you tempted to just call it and see what
I didn't think it was one of those games you want to be like was it Cry Wolf kind of thing? I don't know if that was kind of the game I wanted.
Just when they all showed up, just hit the stopwatch and be like, "Good, hey, that was a good showing, guys, but I think you can do better. Let's try this again. All right, let's have a better attitude about it."
Yeah, I know that'd have been fun to try, but I didn't. I had it on there, and I saw them another couple times because when they took leave and stuff, they would come in and again, they would get seafood, and there was little shops and stuff. And actually the Antigua, which is kind of a city central, is a big European destination. It's right below an active volcano, and it's a city center. It's got cobblestone streets. It's got little coffee shops and all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of Europeans in that area when I went there. So
did they learn nothing from Pompeii? These little cities right at the base of active volcanoes.
But they rely on it because like they collect jade and obsidian, and they carve these like dolphins and stuff, gifts and that kind of stuff. So they really rely on it. There's lots of earthquakes. I went through lots of little tremors, little ones and stuff, because there was in that area there was 12 active volcanoes that you could see when you're out at sea. You could see them smoking, and sometimes they didn't. And I slept through lots of them. So people were like, "Did you feel that tremor?" And I'm like, No,
I can sleep on a fishing boat out there.
Yeah.
So
no. So like I said, it was kind of interesting. The other kind of funny story was I didn't realize that how like you created something, like I created something with my banners and kind of stuff, where someone goes and they kind of take your idea and like, oh, I'm just going to do what he does. because he's making money. Let's do what he does.
Yeah.
No more so than in Guatemala. There's this place called Boot Row, and so it's this little place just outside Antigua, and the captain goes, hey, he's like, I'm gonna go get you some custom made croc skin cowboy boots. I'm like, really? He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, I can't afford that. And he's like, I got you. He's like, you're gonna want to see this. So what happened was, one guy made a little hut, probably the size of your studio, and started making boots. Got so popular that he was making a lot of boots. So a guy that was walking by one day goes, well, that guy's making boots. So he builds a shop right across from him and opens up a boot store. They did that for 5 years. There was 35 boot stores next to each other. They all made boots, and they all would squabble to see who could, you could barter with them because they wanted the business. But because one guy made boots, that guy goes, well, he's making money making boots. I'm going to make boots.
Yeah.
He's going to make money.
Starts up a whole district.
Yep. And then he starts, like, well, I'll undercut him, And I didn't bring him home.
That's incredible.
I had a pair of white belly croc skin boots, custom made.
Wow.
They measured my foot. They had skins and everything else. And before I left, I bartered it with one of the captains. I didn't bring it home. I kind of felt a little guilty. I'm like, I don't know if I can legally bring these in, because I don't think croc skin boots were.
I don't know.
I don't know if they were legal. I mean, I think you can have them now, but I was afraid to, because I hadn't made a country. I'm like, but my captain's like, just wear them home. He's like, they're not gonna go, hey, did you have those made in Guatemala? Like, no one's gonna know, but
they're fake.
Yeah, I don't even have
synthetic
a picture of them, but they have as cool as the
really.
belly.
What did those cost? Do you think? To have those guys make them there.
Okay, so this is where it gets bad. So we bartered because there's 35 of them. I didn't speak enough Spanish. I learned it better as I got there, because what we get taught here in our schools, when you get down there, is rudimentary. They only get to about 3rd grade, so it's very slang. Yeah. And they know what you want. Like if you ask, like, something la piece, like I want a pen, they know it, but that's not their word for it. So unless you speak their language, they're like, we're done, So I think when we ended up getting done, I think those custom made croc skin boots, American, cost us like $85.
Yeah, those would have cost so much to have somebody do that. Yeah,
thousands. And custom, no, it would have cost a lot.
Oh man, incredible.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, it was a fun time. Yeah, and then I left there and came back home, and so that would have been so that's 6, 7, 8. So I'm back in 8. So back here, and I went to I did the Guatemala trips before I went to. Yeah. But I just kind of bounced around, and then I got back home, and I worked for a production company out of Billings, and in 08, I got a job there. It was Production West. They're not there anymore. There was a duplication company, so taking your Chia Pet ads and adding phone numbers and scripting them out and sending them all over the country so they could run their ads. I mean, we got free samples every year. I had piles of Chia Pets. Yeah. And like of gloves and the clapper. Right. All that kind of stuff. So I mean, it was a job for a while, but wow. It's interesting that just having that skill, that background. I mean, how many different areas you've gotten into, and the exposure that you get though by just having that experience or that initial experience. Okay, now where does this take you? And it's kind of like taking you all over the place, it sounds. Oh yeah. Yeah, no, like I said, that's the story pretty much in my 20s, right up until, all my 20s, because when I started working with silversmiths, I was about 30. I turned 30. So, so I spent my 20s right out of school just kind of not knowing what to do, when my degree kind of fizzled out and was kind of up in the air, and I didn't know what to do with it. And it's led me along a lot of places, a lot of cool places. I mean, things I've gotten to do and see and experience, some scary, some fun. I mean, Africa has its own experience. I mean, like I said, lions and everything else, but I mean, we had run-ins with, guards and everything else, and they're holding AKs, and I mean, I mean, there's danger there. I mean, the lioness was, she stopped for me to your door here, like 10 yards. Yeah. And she came out of nowhere. There was no grass. It was the winter time, so it was no grass. And she came out of nowhere on a dead run at us, and we were in the truck. And she only stopped because she got the truck. The truck was bigger than her, like a lot bigger. She could have kept coming. My only plan was I was sitting in the middle seat in the back bench, and this Ranger, I was just going to duck down because there was a guy here and a guy here. Yeah. And I was just hoping that the lion would go over and go either short and hit this guy, or go long and get the guy on the backside and leave me alone, because I don't have a weapon. Yeah. And it was just the same time that all the guys had taken their guns, and they put them in their sleeve bags and put them on the rack in front of them. They didn't have them out.
Oh,
so
man.
I mean, we were the only one that had
ducks.
the only one we had a gun was the park ranger behind us, and he had like a 1957 rusted AK-47. I don't know if they traded bullets between each other. Like, I mean, it's if it fired, I'd be shocked. You know, I mean, like the barrel had rust on it. I mean,
oh,
it's
man.
just like you're going, well, you know, it's gonna work.
That's why that gun, I think, has been so popular, though. That thing can just be so mistreated, and it just keeps working.
Keeps going. Keeps ticking.
Incredible.
But yeah, so like I said, there's a lot of experiences that you get to kind of see when you go through all that stuff.
Wow.
From high end to low end. I mean, I've seen the tops of the world with the guys that I've hunted with. You know, they're just, I mean, you know, they're very wealthy, very nice, but you get to see the top scale, and then I also get to see the, you know, the worst parts too. So, but it does make you grow for sure.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And so now it's like I'm so glad that we talked about all this stuff. I didn't really understand what all your background was. I didn't really know much about you. After talking to you one day at the window, and you said, "Hey, yeah, I saw your podcast and I like your podcast." I asked April about you, and she was like, "Oh yeah, like I grew up with him," and I'm like, and I was like, "Oh, I need to go check out his website. You gave me your card," and I went and I looked at it, and I was like, "Oh, this guy's like putting out all kinds of quality stuff," and I just felt like, how do I not know? I felt like, how do I just not know? Like,
right?
How do I not know about this? You know what I mean? Like, so it's interesting to be able to sit down and just find out about some of the people right around us. You know, while I'm sitting there cooking at that place and don't get to figure all this stuff out with people.
You know, and I think your podcast is great, and you do great too, but just reaching out and finding those members, because I think just in our conversation we had for this, I mean, I think we've talked for 8 hours a day almost.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how many, but
yeah.
You know, the thing is though, you can collaborate now. You can call them and be like, "Hey, I got this idea. I need some help here. I just don't have the time. Can you do this?" And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure. I can help you out. No problem."
Yeah.
You know,
I'm excited about it.
Being a collaboration, I think, makes businesses stronger and makes people stronger, because you build relationships. And like I said, I want to set up a coffee hour like you and Cole and I, and everyone can sit down for 2 hours every week, and we could just BS about everything.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
You know,
and that's why it's also great to get to know, like, what is all your background, your experience, and your influences, and what makes you tick, and what do you like to do versus what do you just do to get by or whatever. That's important stuff to know. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm excited to hear all of this and know what you're into, and because I'm like already, we were talking earlier, my mind's already cranking, thinking about like, oh, that's exciting. There's some real possibilities here. Man, there's some things we could maybe collaborate on and work on, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, we've got all kinds of tangents today, but I mean, like, even just photography wise, I mean, my skill sets are pretty broad, and it's just years of development.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's with anybody. I think what separates you, especially in a creative industry like that, photography, is just how much skill you bring to it, how much expertise you know, and that really separates you, you know. And I've got lots. I mean, I've got years. I mean, just in photography, really, I take my first actual promo ad photo was in 2008.
Yeah. And
till now. So I kind of call that my establishment date. I didn't have Sensory Photography. It wasn't my company yet. It wasn't either. I was trying to do like candid photography, and I couldn't find anything because all those websites were taken. Everybody used Candid, right? So I ended up going to a thesaurus, and I found Sensory, and it's the same thing. So that's kind of how my name got its start, and went that way, and I've been doing it for then. So
what is your what's kind of your favorite thing to shoot photography wise?
I really like commercial. I didn't know I'd like it as much as I did.
Yeah. And
like I said, I was kind of telling you that through the pandemic and everything, and going full time back in end of 20, it was something I learned through. I had a mentor that was kind of helping me establish myself, because I was just part time. I didn't know if I was good enough, to be honest. Like, am I good enough to do this? And
making that kind of that transition from videography over to photography.
Yeah, and when I found someone out of Bozeman, and
did you feel like it was kind of starting over, going from videography to photography?
It is. It's definitely different. It's a change. It's similar, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
You know, and now, like I said, it's so hard because I am a purist. When I shoot video, I want a video camera. I mean, my camera now has the ability to, but I just don't. It's foreign to me in that form. It's just not what I use it for. I use it for photography. I could learn it, and I need to learn it that direction, because that's how it's going. But yeah, it's a hard transition. I mean, lighting is an element is you got to learn.
That's its own science. And I just, I'm a complete amateur, but I've spent a lot of time trying to learn just some basics.
And that's what separates. I mean, majority of photographers anywhere and everything else, a lot of them just shoot natural light, which it's great. Natural light's great because you got the sun. You don't have to learn too much other than you can't have someone looking into the sun with their eyes squinted, right? And that's a big one. No. But once you learn how to do that kind of stuff and shoot natural light, it's a great starting point. I can do it. I love it. I mean, at certain times it keeps, especially for shooting females, soft. Makes everything soft. Everything softens, their face softens. Like with used light, like here, it can create a hard light where you get really hard edges. And women don't want to see hard edges. They want soft, beautiful, elegant, luxury, So you kind of have to learn to light it, but you can. It's just learning how to use that stuff and how to set it up and do that stuff. So I do both worlds. I do favor more having portable strobes and being able to light even when I shoot outdoor stuff. I generally will shoot kind of both. But I really like being able to light things and be able to really make, the downside, like when you shoot outside with natural light, like say if it's a bright day, you have to open and move your shutter so fast that everything behind it's blown out. You can't see the background, which is great. If you want like a white, soft background, you can create that look. But if you wanted to have the mountains in focus and everything else, you got to throw a light in there because you got to speed up your shutter. You got to throw some light on the subject because they're going to be with the light behind them. Otherwise, they're going to be in shadow. And if you don't have a light to throw out there, you're not going to see them.
Yeah. So, the one thing I have found too is I find difficult is like sometimes like the best times of year to shoot is also when, like let's say you got spring colors and you got all just beautiful, there's snow on the mountains, but everything is still green. And the little shooting that I do outside, like, all the colors are so bright and crisp, but then that's the time of year that we have the most just cloud cover just that comes and goes. And I'm like waiting. I find out times I'm sitting here trying to shoot something outside and like 3 minutes from now, I got cloud cover for 10 minutes. And then I've got, I'm sitting here trying to make some consistency in all my cuts and I'm shooting a video or I'm whatever. And it's just going back and forth from dark to light. Oh,
and that's video world too, for sure. Yeah. It's photography world because my favorite times, your best light is towards evening, later light, or very first morning light. It's because you don't want anything direct. You don't want harsh shadows. You don't want that bright light. But again, shooting with stuff that's moving. Because I've shot middle of the day too, where you got some cloud cover. It's awesome. You wait for that cloud to block the sun. Yeah. You can get everything you want. And then that cloud moves in and you got to wait. Okay, we got about 5-minute break here, okay, now let's shoot this. But if you can find a way to utilize both worlds where when you have those bright things, you move them into a shady spot and then throw a light on them, you can get the same effect. Yeah. And that's all learned. Photography, a video I had a background in, I did it in school, so I knew that kind of lighting, but it's different. It's cinema lighting. It's on all the time. So it's a little bit different to do it on the spot and being able to have the equipment to do it. Because it is a lot of equipment. Now everything's so much better. We never used to do high-speed sync before where you can shoot above 200th of a second because flashes can never burst enough light and stay in focus where you could shoot higher than that. Well, now you can go up to 8,000ths of a second.
Really?
Yeah. You can get your light to strobe it. It pops 3 times so you don't have a dark spot. Where your shutter, because your shutter's moving so fast that if it's moving this fast, you got to have enough light to hit quick enough so then it captures. Otherwise, you're going to have like sometimes you might see where you get like a black bar. And it's because that shutter's closing up and down, which I haven't been able to play with mirrorless, but it's got to work the same way. It doesn't have a shutter that goes in front of the mirror to take that picture, but and I'm sure they don't have that trouble because it's brand new technology. Yeah,
and I don't get into any of that. Like with my stuff, I don't really know anything about that. I put up a stationary light. I light it so I can see it, how it's going to look, and I make all my adjustments, to it from there. But it's one thing I've thought about trying to get into a little bit. I just haven't pulled the trigger on any of it, but I know there's a whole nother science there to learn.
Oh, like even your studio lights are great too. But like we used to do this, it was an old trick. We just go get a dimmer switch, and then you could just dim how much power is going in. Like if you didn't want it so bright, you could dim it down a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you could set your camera settings to adjust for that. But if you wanted it softer or lighter, you could just, I mean, it was a, $3 dimmer switch. You just plug it in and ramp it up or down to block how much power was going in and out. So it was the DIY of how to dim your lights if they're too bright.
And now too, once I've discovered, because I'm such an amateur at all this, but then when I finally discovered ND filters and variable ND filters, I love those things. I use them for everything now. So that's helped me out too.
Yeah, it's real fun to get like an ND 10. Like you put it on your lens if you can't see your subject through the camera, but it's blocking 10 stops of light, and you do it in like waterfalls, like I've taken
to make that smooth flowing image.
Yeah, and then like I said, and then you take it and then picture, probably sometimes 10 stops. I think last time I took this year when the big flow over at Natural Bridges, I did a 10 with a 10 stop filter, and it was like a 3 or 4 second exposure in the middle of the day.
Wow.
That's how much light it blocked. But when it got done, it was perfectly balanced. You had this beautiful soft veil, waterfall just coming down. Everywhere it hit was soft, all smooth. It's got its own look, but it's fun. Wow. And like I said,
Did you shoot that from down low at that, or were you up high?
No, I walked around and I found all the way down the bottom.
All the way down to the base.
My wife, I think on my Instagram.
That's a beautiful spot.
My wife's got an Instagram picture she took from behind me setting up, taking it, because the water was so bad. I mean, we were there on June 12th because it was my wife's birthday. There was no water flowing over Natural Bridge.
Okay.
I woke up that morning and everyone said, "Oh my God, everything's flooding." That's when all the water hit.
Oh, that was last year's flood.
Yeah. And on the 13th, less than 24 hours, we were there at noon on the 12th. Less than 24 hours later, it was blowing over the top of that.
And it was coming off the top.
Over the top.
I've never been there to see it come off the top.
So much water. I've photographed it twice. I did it in 19 when it did that. And I got some pictures of it from down low and from above. And then this last year I did it was twice as much water. Wow. It was dirty water, because the first year in 19 it was more white, but it was just brown, yucky water. So I slowed it down, and you can see the colors, and I colored it some in Photoshop. I kind of left it natural just to kind of show it's like this is raging water.
Yeah.
But it was horrible, because down below the farms down there, we left them and they were sandbagging, they were underwater.
Wow.
It was just so much. It was just the perfect storm. That whole situation, the melt.
I didn't even think to go out there to go see that.
And like I said, I know it flowed like that over the top of that falls for like a week or two almost. It was still going to the top, but so much water, because there's that big hole that takes it all down.
Yeah.
For that to have enough flow and then have
pass
come
up that hole.
It was, and it had actually blown so much water that there was little holes from the pressure. It must have been eating through the rock. It was making other little running waterfalls down like little holes that I think is just erosion, but it was so powerful.
Wow.
Just incredible. Literally a day. Because my wife's like, "Oh, it's my birthday." And I said, "Well, let's just go over there and take a look. I'll take some pictures." And so I have a spot on my Instagram. I took a picture of the exact same spot on the 12th and on the 13th, and you would never believe that was a day apart. Less than a day apart. Probably 12 hours, because it happened in the middle of the night.
Wow. Have you put them side by side?
I think I do. I think it might be my Instagram.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, no, it was crazy.
Wow.
Huh. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh well. I'll have to reschedule that. My dog was supposed to go to the vet.
Oh.
That's all right.
Oh man, I'm sorry. We kind of hooked up earlier today and then just got chatty about all kinds of things. And this is one of the rare times when I'm actually able to, this is a Wednesday. I'm never usually, like right now I'm supposed to be in bed. This is like super late for me on a usual basis, but I have this week I've got some time on my hands here, so it's actually kind of nice to feel a little normal. It really feels nice to feel normal, like with the time, and not be like panicking over, oh, it's 4:37 p.m. Like, holy crap, I'm like 2 hours behind getting in bed. Right. So, cool. Well.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time, man, to come and share some of these experiences with me. I'm excited. My brain's going to go a little crazy. And I would love to figure out some type of collaborations we could do here in the future. And I feel like I don't know. I'm excited about it. I feel like there's some cool things, and
sure.
I'd love to be a part of with you. And it's kind of neat to learn about local people who are got all kinds of interesting backgrounds and things that they're passionate about, and it's kind of fun to be able to just sit down and just take the time and just talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm down with the coffee hour too, man.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be fun.
Give me an invite to that.
Yeah, we'll do that for sure.
So, cool, man. Well, I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to talk. I feel like I still have a lot more to get into with you.
Sure.
But I appreciate you coming and doing this, man.
No, I really appreciate it. It's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Really cool.